Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto joined the Beast Pirates and fell in love with Black Maria and Ulti. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Azure Dragon and the Golden Fox. The universe did not scream as it died. It simply went silent. One moment, Naruto Uzumaki was a maelstrom of golden light and righteous fury, his truth-seeking orbs a halo of absolute defense around him. The next, he was floating in a canvas of non-existence. The being before him was not a creature of flesh or chakra, but an absence. A star-shaped hole in reality, rimmed with a crystalline structure that drank light and sound and hope. The Otsutsuki had been a tangible threat, beings with ego and ambition. This was entropy given a mind. The silent star. Your world is loud, it had communicated, not in words, but in a wave of pure, chilling comprehension that bypassed his ears and stabbed directly into his soul. Life is a cacophony. A flaw in the perfect quiet. I am the correction. He had fought. He had poured every ounce of his six paths sage power, the strength of a demigod who had brought peace to a world of endless war, into his attacks. A tailed beast bomb raisin shuriken, a vortex of planetary destruction, had flown toward the entity only to unravel into shimmering dust a foot from its edge, its energy siphoned into the quiet void. He was the strongest shinobi to have ever lived, the savior of his world, and he was losing. With the last dregs of his power, drawing on Kurama's seemingly bottomless reserves, Naruto formed one final, desperate attack. He didn't try to destroy the entity. He tried to seal it, to wrap it in a chrysalis of planetary devastation-level chakra and cast it into a dead dimension. It was a technique of his own design, born from the Sage of Six Paths legacy. The silent star did not counter. It simply opened. The star-shaped hole in reality dilated, its crystalline edges fracturing spacetime. Naruto's sealing jutsu was swallowed not with a bang, but with the silent, inexorable pull of a black hole. And it didn't stop. The void reached for him, a predator that had tasted its prey. There was a lurch, a nauseating sensation of being turned inside out. The golden light of his chakra cloak was stripped away, his senses were torn asunder, and his consciousness, the very fiber of his being, was dragged through a wound in the fabric of all things. There was no color, no sound, only the feeling of infinite, cold falling. Then, a sudden, brutal impact, a gasp of salty air, and the black, crushing pressure of the deep. His lungs burned. Instinct, older and deeper than any jutsu, took over. He kicked, fighting toward a surface he couldn't see. His body was a leaden weight, his chakra coils scraped raw and empty. He broke the surface with a ragged gasp, the night sky above a smear of unfamiliar stars. A colossal wave, born of a storm he hadn't even noticed, crested over him and slammed him back under. He was going to drown. After everything, after Madara, after Kagaya, after bringing Sasuke back and forging a peace that cost him everything, he was going to die alone in an unknown ocean. A bitter, laughless chuckle escaped him in a rush of bubbles. It was almost funny. As his vision began to tunnel, a shape blotted out the dim starlight from above. It was huge, monstrous, a ship of dark wood and iron plating that seemed more like a fortress than a vessel. At its prow, a leering, beast-like figurehead snarled at the raging sea. A flag, whipped by the gale, depicted a skull with a pair of long, curved horns. A grappling hook shot out, snagging his tattered black shirt. He was too weak to resist as he was hauled from the water, dripping and limp, onto a deck slick with rain. He collapsed, the world a dizzying swirl of motion. Figures surrounded him. They were massive, their bodies misshapen and grotesque in the flickering lamplight. A man with a thick shell like a turtle spat on the deck near his head. Another, whose arms were long and covered in wiry fur, nudged him with a steel-toed boot. They were a chaotic menagerie of man and beast, their laughter a low, guttural rumble. "What's this, then?" one of them grunted, his voice thick with liquor. A drowned rat? Look at his hair, another slurred, prodding Naruto's golden spikes. Bright as the gold in the flower capital. Leave him be. The voice was younger, clearer, cutting through the drunken din. A figure stepped forward, his shadow falling over Naruto. He was lean and tall, wearing a strange mask over his lower face and a black coat. But it was his legs that made Naruto's exhausted mind stutter. Below the waist, he was a dinosaur, a bipedal reptile of immense power, his clawed feet thudding heavily on the deck. The dinosaur man knelt, ignoring the water pooling around Naruto. He felt a hand, surprisingly gentle, tilt his head up. Sharp, analytical eyes scanned him. He's not just some drifter, the man said, his gaze lingering on the remnants of Naruto's Six Paths jacket and the faint, residual hum of power that clung to him like a shroud. Even drained, the echo of his strength was undeniable. There's something about him. He's breathing, but barely. So we toss him back, page 1, the turtle man asked. The one called page 1 stood, a thoughtful frown on his face. No. Anyone this strange, washed up in a storm like this. Kaido-san will want to see him. Tie him up. If he's strong, he's a prize. If he's not, he's food for the gators. Naruto's consciousness faded as rough ropes were cinched around his wrists. His last thought was not of fear, but of a profound, soul-crushing weariness. He had saved the world. And the world had moved on without him, leaving him feeling like a relic, a sheathed sword in a time of peace. Maybe a new world, a new master, maybe that was all he was good for anymore. Consciousness returned in jarring waves. The first thing he registered was the noise. A cacophony of roaring laughter, the clashing of heavy mugs, the discordant strumming of a three-stringed instrument, and the percussive crunch of bone. It was the sound of 1,000 violent drunks celebrating Armageddon. The second was the smell. A thick, almost suffocating aroma of roasting meat, stale sake, and unwashed bodies. He cracked his eyes open. He was in a vast, cavernous hall, its ceiling lost in shadow. Enormous lanterns cast a chaotic, flickering light over a scene of pure debauchery. Men and women of impossible size and shape caroused, fought, and feasted at long tables overflowing with food. He saw a man with the head of a goat arguing with a woman whose arms split into 6 at the elbows. It was a living nightmare, a carnival of the grotesque. He was on his knees, his hands bound behind him by thick, heavy chains that felt cold and absolute. They were more than just iron, they felt infused with something, some property of this world that made them feel unnervingly solid. He was at the foot of a dais, a focal point in the pandemonium. And upon that dais sat a king. No, not a king. A force of nature. The man was immense, a mountain of muscle and coiled rage who made the oversized furniture around him look like a child's playthings. A pair of colossal, dark horns curled from his head. A rope of sacred Shimenawa was tied around his waist, stark white against his dark clothing. An intricate tattoo of azure scales flowed down his arm, disappearing beneath a spiked gauntlet. He held a giant, spiked club, a kanabo, that rested against his throne as if it were a simple walking stick. In his other hand, he held a gourd the size of a grown man, from which he took long, gurgling swallows. His eyes, small and sharp beneath a heavy brow, were fixed on Naruto. They were the eyes of a creature who had seen everything, destroyed most of it, and was utterly, profoundly bored. This was Kaido. Naruto didn't need to be told. The sheer, suffocating pressure of the man's presence was an announcement in itself. It was different from the chakra of the tailed beasts or the Otsutsuki. This was raw, physical might honed to a godlike edge, a living embodiment of destruction. So, Kaido's voice boomed, a deep bass rumble that cut through the hall's chaos like a thunderclap, causing an immediate, if temporary, silence. This is the golden fish my boys pulled from the sea. Page 1 stood beside the throne, arms crossed. He was unconscious. But the energy coming off him was unusual. Kaido leaned forward, the wooden throne groaning in protest. His shadow fell over Naruto, a blanket of intimidation. You're awake now, boy. You are in Onigashima, my fortress. You breathe my air and kneel on my floor. That makes you my property. So tell me, what kind of property are you? Are you a treasure to be polished, or a stone to be crushed? Naruto's head was pounding. His chakra was still a faint trickle, but his senses were returning. He could feel the sheer, unadulterated power radiating from the man on the throne. He could also feel the stares of hundreds of pirates, each one a predator sizing him up. He was weak, chained, and utterly alone in a world he didn't understand. And for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of something other than weariness. A spark of his old, defiant self. He lifted his head, his cerulean eyes meeting Kaido's without a tremor. He didn't shout. He didn't plead. His voice was quiet, raspy, but it carried in the silent hall. Where am I? Kaido let out a short, barking laugh. Not, who are you, or, let me go, but, where am I? You have spirit. I like that. You are in the land of Wano. And this, he gestured with his gourd to the chaos around them, is the pinnacle of the world. A place where strength is the only law. The strong live, feast, and rule. The weak serve, starve, and die. It is the natural order of things, an honest truth this pathetic world has forgotten. The word struck a chord deep within Naruto. An honest truth. After the war, peace had been anything but simple. It was a fragile thing, maintained by endless political maneuvering, compromises, and lies. He, the hero, had become a political symbol, a deterrent whose very existence was a threat. He was a weapon that had to be kept polished and holstered, and the idleness was eating him alive. He missed the clarity of the battlefield, the simple truth of a punch, the raw honesty of a life-or-death struggle. Kaido's world was brutal, savage, and cruel. But it was also simple. It was honest. I spent my life fighting for a different truth, Naruto said, his voice gaining strength. For the idea that the strong should protect the weak. A noble lie, Kaido sneered, taking another deep swig of sake. A pretty cage for the sheep, built by wolves who want all the mutton for themselves. The world government. The Marines. They preach justice while their celestial dragons live as gods. It's all hypocrisy. Here, there are no lies. There is only power. If you have it, you take what you want. If you don't, you die. Do you have power, boy? Naruto looked down at his chains, then back up at Kaido. The exhaustion was still there, a bone-deep ache for a home he could never return to. But now, it was mixed with something else. A dawning, terrifying sense of opportunity. He couldn't go back. The path home was gone, likely forever. What was he supposed to do? Try to recreate the world he'd lost? Fight for a justice he no longer fully believed in? Or could he find a new purpose for his strength? A new world to shape? Let me show you, Naruto said, the words tasting strange and foreign on his tongue. A wide, cruel grin split Kaido's face. It was the expression of a man who had been offered a new, exciting toy. Worororo. Excellent. The fish has teeth. He slammed his gourd down, the sound echoing like a cannon shot. A challenge. I accept. But you don't fight me. Not yet. You'll prove your worth against one of my numbers. He pointed a thick finger toward a shadowed alcove. From it, a creature emerged, its footsteps shaking the very foundations of the hall. It was a giant, easily 30 feet tall, but horrifically malformed. Its face was a twisted parody of a man's, with a long, drooling snout and vacant eyes. It was one of Kaido's failed experiments with artificial devil fruits, a being of immense size and strength but with the intellect of a rabid animal. Jackie! Kaido bellowed. Smash him! The pirates roared, clearing a space, their bloodlust a palpable force in the air. They kicked over tables and shoved their comrades aside, eager for the spectacle of violence. Jackie lumbered toward Naruto, a low, guttural roar building in its chest. Naruto remained on his knees, his eyes closed. The chains were a problem. They felt dead. Chakra didn't flow through them. But they were still connected to the manacles on his wrists. He focused, not on his vast reserves, but on the very core of his being. The sage's power was more than just energy, it was an understanding of all things, of life force itself. He didn't push chakra into the chains. He pushed it into his own body, a sharp, contained, explosive burst. Now. A pulse of brilliant golden energy, no bigger than his own body, erupted from him. It wasn't an attack. It was a statement of sheer will. Crack. The sound was like a thunderclap right next to the ear. The chains, forged to hold giants and sea kings, didn't just break. They shattered. The links exploded outwards like shrapnel, embedding themselves in the stone floor and wooden pillars around him. The hall fell into a stunned, absolute silence. Even Kaido's drunken grin faltered for a fraction of a second. Naruto rose to his feet, rolling his shoulders. He felt weak, the single burst having cost him dearly, but it was enough. The giant, Jackie, paused in its advance, its dim brain struggling to comprehend what had just happened. Naruto didn't give it time to think. He blurred forward, his speed still astonishing even in his weakened state. He appeared before the giant's mountainous torso, his right hand raised. Rasengan. A sphere of pure, swirling chakra, a perfect blue globe of contained destruction, materialized in his palm. The sound it made was like 1,000 birds chirping, a high-pitched, grinding hum of immense power. The pirates who had seen 1,000 battles and 100 strange abilities stared, their mouths agape. They had never seen anything like it. It was beautiful. And it was terrifying. He didn't shout a grand attack name. He simply thrust his hand forward. The Rasengan met Jackie's chest. There was no grand explosion. There was only a sickening crunch and the sound of a vortex grinding flesh and bone into pulp. The giant's body didn't fly backward. It caved in on itself. A spiral of raw, concussive force drilled through its torso, obliterating everything in its path and erupting from its back in a spray of gore. For a moment, the giant stood there, a perfect, spiraling hole punched clean through its center. Then, it toppled forward, its fall shaking the entire fortress of Onigashima. Silence. Dead, profound silence. The only sound was the drip of blood from the ceiling where Jackie's remains had splattered. The pirates, moments ago a roaring mob, were frozen, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and absolute awe. They had seen Kaido perform acts of casual, world-breaking destruction. But this was different. This was precise, clean, and utterly, contemptuously dominant. It wasn't a brawl. It was an execution. Naruto stood over the fallen giant, breathing a little heavily. His golden hair seemed to glow in the lantern light. He was a beacon of impossible power in a hall of monsters. From the dais, Kaido began to laugh. It started as a low chuckle and grew into a full-throated, earth-shaking roar of pure, unadulterated delight. He threw his head back and bellowed, his laughter echoing across the entire island. Worororo. Magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. He slammed his kanabo on the floor, cracking the stone. You. Boy. You have a name. Naruto, he replied, his voice steady. Naruto. Kaido boomed. You are no longer my property. You are one of my beast pirates. Drink. Celebrate our new comrade. The frozen hall exploded into a cheer 100 times louder than before, a roar of acceptance for the new monster in their midst. Sake flowed freely as several pirates hoisted Naruto onto their shoulders, parading him around like a conquering hero. Amidst the chaos, two figures watched him with particular intensity. From the upper levels of the castle, in a room filled with silks and the scent of intoxicating incense, a woman of impossible height and beauty watched the proceedings through a gossamer screen. Her long, black hair was intricately styled, and she held a delicate silk fan over her lips. This was Black Maria. She had seen men of immense strength, men of cunning, and men of ambition. But she had never seen anything like the golden-haired boy. It wasn't just his power that captivated her, it was the look in his eyes. A profound loneliness, a weariness that warred with an unbreakable core of defiance. He was a beautiful, tragic enigma. A spider, she knew the allure of a captivating fly. A smile, predatory and genuinely intrigued, graced her hidden lips. Down in the thick of the chaos, another woman watched him, her reaction far less subtle. She was shorter, but crackled with a volatile energy that made even the larger pirates give her a wide berth. She wore a revealing outfit and a mask that framed her angry, expressive eyes. Her long hair was two-toned, and two small horns jutted from her head. This was Ulti. And she was furious. Who was this blonde upstart? He appears from nowhere, gets a personal audience with Kaido-sama, and in one move, earns the respect that she and her brother had to bleed for. The attention, the cheers, the sheer arrogance of him, it was infuriating. With a growl, she stomped through the crowd, shoving pirates aside with brute force. Get out of my way. She reached Naruto, who had just been set down. He looked at her, his expression neutral. You, she snapped, jabbing a finger at his chest. You think you're hot stuff, don't you? Showing off for Kaido-sama like some preening peacock. Naruto just blinked. He asked me to prove my strength. Don't get smart with me, she shrieked, her verbal tick slipping out. Hey Payan. Without another word, she lunged, lowering her head. It was her signature move, a headbutt delivered with the force of a cannonball, and powered by her ancient Zoan devil fruit. It had shattered steel plates and sent giants flying. The pirates nearby scrambled back, expecting to see the newcomer's head turn to paste. Naruto didn't move. He didn't dodge. He didn't even raise his arms. As her forehead, hard as stone, rocketed toward his, he simply met it with his own. Crack. The impact was bone-jarring, a sound that made teeth rattle. A visible shockwave rippled through the air between them. The floor beneath their feet spiderwebbed with cracks. Ulti was thrown back a single step, her eyes wide with disbelief, a roaring in her ears. A thin trickle of blood ran down from her hairline. Naruto hadn't moved an inch. He stood as firm as a mountain, his expression unchanged except for the slightest narrowing of his eyes. An identical trickle of blood ran down his own forehead. He hadn't just blocked her attack. He had met it, matched it, and achieved a perfect, impossible stalemate. The rowdy hall fell silent once more. Staring down a Yonko was one thing. One-shotting a number was another. But meeting Ulti's headbutt and not even flinching? That was sacrilege. Ulti stared at him, her rage momentarily replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. He just took it. And he looked more annoyed than hurt. The blood on his forehead seemed to mock her. Naruto raised a hand and wiped the blood away with his thumb, his gaze never leaving hers. Is that all? He asked, his voice calm. Her shock instantly combusted back into white-hot fury. You bastard, she screamed, preparing to lunge again. But before she could, Naruto's focus wavered. A sudden, ice-cold spike of pain lanced through his mind. It wasn't physical. It was psychic, alien. For a split second, the raucous hall of Onigashima vanished, replaced by a vision of a starless, silent cosmos. He felt it, the cold, patient, hungry awareness of the silent star. A predator tasting the air across dimensions, confirming its prey was still alive. It was hunting him. The vision vanished as quickly as it came, leaving him with a phantom chill and a throbbing ache behind his eyes. He swayed on his feet, the combination of chakra exhaustion and the psychic assault finally taking its toll. He was in a new world, surrounded by monsters, with a god of anti-existence hunting him from across the void. And as he looked at the furious girl with horns, the giant, drunken dragon man on the throne, and the chaos of his new home, a single, grim thought echoed in his mind. This was going to be complicated. Chapter 2, The Spider's Web and the Dinosaurs Charged. The quarters assigned to Naruto were less a room and more a gilded cage. Kaido, in his boisterous magnanimity, had granted him a suite in the upper echelons of the Onigashima fortress, a place of honor typically reserved for his most favored commanders. The floors were covered in rich, deep purple rugs from a conquered land. The walls were hung with intricate tapestries depicting glorious, violent battles. A low table of polished, dark wood sat surrounded by silk cushions, and a massive bed, large enough for 3 men, was piled high with furs. From the balcony, Naruto had a commanding view of the ceaseless, riotous party that was the Beast Pirates' daily existence. It was a cage because, despite the opulence, it felt entirely alien. Naruto had spent most of his life in a small, sparse apartment, and even his home as Hokage had been modest. This suffocating luxury was a constant reminder that he did not belong. On his first night, he had unceremoniously shoved the silk cushions into a corner and pushed the heavy table against the wall to clear a space. He didn't sleep in the fur-piled bed, he rolled out a thin blanket on the hard floor. It felt more honest. His days fell into a strange rhythm. He would wake before the sun, his internal clock still set to a shinobi's discipline. While the rest of the fortress slept off its drunken stupor, he would find a quiet ledge on the massive skull-shaped mountain and meditate. He focused on his recovery, his chakra coils slowly, painstakingly knitting themselves back together. The transit between dimensions had done more than just exhaust him, it had frayed the very pathways of his energy, and it was a slow, arduous process to heal. He observed the inhabitants of this strange new world. He saw cruelty he couldn't stomach, a gifter with the lower body of a chicken kicking a servant for spilling his drink, a brawl ending with one man casually tossing another from a parapet into the churning sea below. But he also saw a bizarre kind of camaraderie. He saw pirates who had just tried to kill each other over a leg of meat sharing a skin of sake moments later, their grudges as fleeting as their tempers. They were a crew bound not by loyalty in the sense he understood it, but by a shared worship of strength and a collective orbit around the gravitational center that was Kaido. He was an anomaly. He didn't drink to excess, he didn't join the brawls, and he didn't partake in the casual brutality. He was a silent, golden-haired ghost drifting through their halls of violence, his very presence a quiet question mark. The rank-and-file pirates gave him a wide berth, whispering about the man who had shattered chains with a thought and vaporized a number with a glowing blue ball. They treated him with a mixture of fear and reverence, the only 2 emotions that seemed to hold any currency in Onigashima. His quiet recovery, however, was not destined to last. The first ambush came 3 days after his arrival. He was crossing one of the many stone bridges that connected the different sections of the fortress, the wind whipping his tattered jacket around him. He sensed her before he saw her. A flicker of killing intent, raw and unfiltered. "You're mine." The shriek echoed off the stone. Ulti launched herself from the roof of a nearby pagoda, a screaming, 2-tone missile of pure rage. She had learned from their first encounter. This time, her body was already shifting, scales appearing on her skin, her teeth sharpening. She was using her devil fruit power, tapping into the prehistoric might of the Pachycephalosaurus. Her headbutt was no longer just a physical attack, it was backed by the power of an ancient Zoan. Naruto didn't break stride. He pivoted on his heel, the movement fluid and economical. Her headbutt, aimed for the back of his skull, missed by a whisper, the force of its passage stirring his hair. He let her momentum carry her past him, then his hand shot out, grabbing the back of her jacket. With a sharp tug, he redirected her trajectory, spinning her around and sending her stumbling toward the edge of the bridge. She caught herself just shy of the railing, her clawed feet digging into the stone. She whirled around, her eyes blazing. Don't you run from me. I didn't, Naruto replied calmly, resuming his walk. You missed. That, of course, was the worst thing he could have said. With another roar, she charged again, this time leading with a wild, clawed swipe. He met it with his forearm, the impact sending a jolt up his arm. Her strength was prodigious. She followed with a furious barrage of kicks and punches, each one aimed to maim. It was like sparring with a younger, angrier, and significantly more durable Lee. She was all instinct and aggression, a hurricane of motion. But her movements, for all their power, were wide and predictable. He flowed around her, a leaf on the wind, parrying, deflecting, and redirecting. He never struck back, merely using her own force against her. The second ambush was in the mess hall. He was sitting alone, eating a bowl of rice, when she drop-kicked his table, sending it flying into a wall. The third was in the central plaza, where she tried to tackle him from behind while he was watching two giants arm wrestle. Each time, the result was the same. He would effortlessly avoid her primary assault, leading to a frantic, one-sided spar that ended with her screaming in frustration as he simply walked away. Her relentless attacks became a source of entertainment for the other pirates. They would form cheering circles, placing bets on whether the Psycho Dino girl would finally land a clean hit on the Golden Fox. The breaking point came a week into his stay. She cornered him in one of the armories, a vast chamber filled with racks of oversized katanas and clubs. She had been waiting. For him, her arms crossed, a scowl etched permanently onto her face. No more running, she snarled. This ends now, Peipian. The doors slammed shut behind him, presumably barred by her brother, Page 1, who had taken to following their encounters with a resigned sigh. I've never run from you, Ulti, Naruto said, his voice patient. And I'm not going to fight you. You will. She charged, her feet pounding the stone floor. This time there was no wildness. Her movements were focused, her rage honed to a fine point. She had been observing him, learning. She feinted a headbutt, and as he shifted his weight to parry, she dropped low, sweeping his legs with her tail, which had partially manifested in her hybrid form. It was a clever move. It almost worked. Naruto's senses, honed by a lifetime of war, screamed a warning. He didn't have time to dodge. He jumped, tucking his legs, and her tail swept harmlessly under him. He landed silently, his eyes sharp. She was adapting. Good. He decided to end it. As she lunged again, he didn't retreat. He moved forward, stepping inside her guard. Her clawed hand sliced for his throat. He caught her wrist, his grip like iron. Her other hand came swinging. He caught that one, too. He used her own momentum to spin her, forcing her off balance, and in one smooth, practiced motion, he had her arm twisted behind her back and her body pinned against a weapon rack. The oversized swords rattled from the impact. Her face was pressed against the cold steel, her body locked in his hold. She struggled, a furious growl escaping her lips, but he held her firm. He was stronger, his control absolute. The pirates who had followed them, expecting another chase, fell silent. He could have mocked her. He could have gloated. It was what anyone else in the Beast Pirates would have done. Instead, he leaned in, his voice low and for her ears only. You're fast, he said, his breath warm against her ear. Your instincts are sharp. Your power is immense. She froze. Her struggle ceased. This was not what she expected. But you're predictable, he continued, his tone that of a seasoned instructor, not a rival. You announce every major attack by screaming. You let your anger guide you instead of your head. If you fought with a clear mind, you'd be twice as dangerous. He let her go. He just released her and took a step back. Ulti slowly turned, her chest heaving. Her face was a maelstrom of confusion, fury, and something else, something she couldn't name. He hadn't just beaten her. He had analyzed her, critiqued her, and then, paid her a genuine compliment. He acknowledged her strength, saw her potential, and pointed out her flaws as if he were trying to help. No one had ever done that. They feared her, obeyed her, or provoked her. No one had ever treated her with such infuriating, disarming respect. What? She stammered, the words catching in her throat. You're strong, Ulti, Naruto said, turning to leave. Stop wasting it. He walked out of the armory, leaving her standing there amidst the weapons, her mind reeling. She stared at his retreating back, a strange heat rising in her cheeks. You idiot, she finally shrieked at the empty doorway, but the usual venom was gone, replaced by a flustered, bewildering turmoil. She hated him. She hated how easily he had handled her. But she also couldn't deny the truth in his words. And worse, she couldn't deny the strange, unfamiliar flicker of admiration she felt. It was the most infuriating feeling in the world. If Ulti's approach was a battering ram, Black Maria's was a silken garrote. 2 days after his final spar with Ulti, a formal invitation arrived. It was delivered by a woman in a beautiful kimono, her face hidden by a kitsune mask. The invitation itself was on scented paper, the calligraphy a work of art. It was a summons, no, an invitation, to the private estate of Black Maria. Naruto knew who she was. He had seen her observing the chaos from the upper levels, a regal, statuesque figure who seemed above the filth and fury of the main hall. She was one of the Tobi Rappo, the 6 strongest headliners, the same as Ulti and Page 1. But where they were frontline brawlers, she presided over the island's pleasure district, a web of entertainment and information. His sage mode, still recovering but functional, had picked up on her gaze multiple times. It was a curious, analytical stare, like a collector admiring a rare and fascinating specimen. He knew this invitation was a test of a different kind. He went. Her estate was an island of serene beauty in the heart of Onagashima's chaos. Delicate paper lanterns cast a soft, warm glow over manicured gardens and babbling brooks. The air was thick with cloying incense and the ghost of 1,000 whispered secrets. The sound of a lone shamisen drifted from the main building, a haunting, melancholic melody. He was led into a large, dimly lit room. The walls were draped in heavy silks, and the floor was a maze of plush cushions. In the center of the room, a woman sat, holding a long, elegant kizuru pipe. It was Black Maria. She was even taller up close, a giantess of impossible grace. Her long, black hair was adorned with golden ornaments, and she wore a magnificent kimono that did little to hide the dangerous curves of her figure. The most striking thing about her, however, was her smile. It was a knowing, predatory thing, yet it held a universe of charm. From the ceiling, almost invisible in the dim light, hung intricate, shimmering threads. They were spiderwebs, but they glowed with a faint, ethereal light. It was a display of her devil fruit power, a declaration of her domain. He had walked into the spider's parlor. Naruto-san, she purred, her voice a low, smoky contralto. Welcome. I am so glad you could accept my humble invitation. Please, sit. He chose a cushion opposite her, moving with a calm that seemed to amuse her. He sat cross-legged, his posture relaxed but ready. You've certainly caused a stir since your arrival, she continued, taking a slow puff from her pipe and exhaling a fragrant cloud of smoke. To face down Kaido-sama, to dispatch a number so elegantly. And to weather little Ulti's temper. You are a man of many talents. I've been told, Naruto said, his expression unreadable. Her smile widened. The game had begun. A man of few words, as well. I find that so intriguing. A mystery. Everyone here wears their ambitions on their sleeve. They want power, they want Kaido-sama's favor, they want to plunder and destroy. But you. I watch you, and I cannot discern what you want. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, roamed over him. Tell me, Naruto-san. What does a man who seems to have the power of a god truly desire? It was a loaded question, wrapped in silk. She was trying to pry him open, to find a weakness, a desire she could exploit. His sage mode tingled. He could feel the subtle web of deception in her words, the hunter's patience behind her charming facade. He could play her game. He could be evasive, mysterious. But that wasn't his way. He remembered his old master, Jiraiya, telling him that the best way to deal with a web of lies was with a simple, sharp truth. He met her gaze, his blue eyes clear and direct. "I don't know," he said. The answer was so simple, so honest, it took her by surprise. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. "I lost my way home," Naruto continued, his voice quiet but firm. "Everything I fought for, everyone I knew, is gone. I'm in a world I don't understand, surrounded by people whose rules I don't know. What do I desire? A purpose. A reason for all this." He gestured vaguely, not at her room, but at himself, at the power that hummed just beneath his skin. Black Maria was momentarily speechless. She had expected bravado, or cunning, or a lie. She had not expected this raw, unvarnished vulnerability. It was a far more potent seduction than any she could have devised. A powerful man, adrift and searching for meaning. It was the most dangerous and alluring combination imaginable. She recovered her composure, her smile returning, though it was a little less practiced this time. A purpose, she mused. Many have found their purpose here, in service to Kaido-sama. His dream is a grand one. A world of glorious war, where only the strong survive. Is that your purpose? Naruto asked, turning the question back on her. To serve that dream? She laughed, a low, musical sound. My purpose is to thrive, Naruto-san. To create a world of beauty and pleasure within this fortress of beasts. To offer a sanctuary, an escape. And to ensure that I am the one who controls it. She leaned forward, the silk of her kimono parting slightly. But a web is so much more secure when it has a strong anchor. A man like you could be more than just an anchor. You could be the king of the entire web. It was a direct offer. An alliance. A partnership. Power, pleasure, control. Everything a man in his position was supposed to want. Naruto looked around the room, at the shimmering, beautiful webs that hung from the ceiling. He looked at her, at the mask of the charming hostess, the seductive spider. And his sage mode didn't just show him her intentions, it showed him the deep-seated loneliness behind them. The need to build this elaborate trap because she feared being caught in someone else's. You don't need all this, he said softly, his gaze sweeping across the room. The webs, the smoke, the games. He looked directly into her eyes. To get someone's attention. Just talking is fine. The effect was more potent than any jutsu. Black Maria's smile vanished. For the first time, her mask of sultry confidence cracked completely. She stared at him, her dark eyes wide with an emotion he couldn't quite decipher. He hadn't rejected her offer. He hadn't fallen for her seduction. He had simply seen through it. He had seen the person behind the persona and told her she was enough. A long, heavy silence stretched between them. The shamisen music from outside seemed to fade into the background. Finally, she leaned back, a genuine, small smile touching her lips. It was a completely different expression from her usual predatory grin. It was softer, more uncertain. You, she whispered, her voice losing its smoky affectation, are a very dangerous man, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto's rising stock did not go unnoticed by the other calamities. While King the Wildfire watched from the shadows, his masked face betraying nothing, Queen the Plague was far less subtle. Queen, a grotesquely large, cyborg-enhanced man with a flair for theatrics and a towering sense of pride, saw Naruto not as an asset, but as a problem. This blonde upstart was stealing the show. Kaido was praising him. The crew was cheering for him. It was unacceptable. Queen was the star. Performer of the Beast Pirates, the master of science and entertainment. He wouldn't be upstaged. A direct challenge was out of the question. Queen was arrogant, but not stupid. He had seen what Naruto did to Jackie. So, he resorted to what he did best, treachery and technology. A little test, he announced to his followers, a sadistic glee in his voice. Let's see if our new golden boy is as tough as he looks when he's not posturing for Kaido-san. The test came while Naruto was walking through the industrial sector of Onigashima, a smog-choked area of forges and workshops where Queen's experiments were built. Two figures dropped from the scaffolding above, landing in front of him. One was a hulking man whose arms had been replaced with massive, steam-powered pile bunkers. The other was a lithe, twitchy gifter, a failed smile user who was a grotesque fusion of man, bat, and lion, his face a horrifying mess of features. Naruto, the cyborg boomed, his voice distorted by a speaker in his chest. Queen-sama wants a word. He says you're due for a performance review. Naruto sighed. He didn't have to be a censor to feel the killing intent rolling off them. This wasn't a review. It was an assassination attempt, and a sloppy one at that. I'm not interested, Naruto said, turning to walk away. The review isn't optional, the bat-lion creature shrieked, launching itself at him, its claws extended. Naruto didn't even look. He created a single shadow clone without a hand sign. The clone appeared behind the gifter, grabbed its legs, and slammed it face first into the grimy floor with a sickening crunch. The cyborg stared in shock for a half-second before roaring and firing one of his pile bunkers. A massive steel piston shot toward Naruto with the force of a freight train. Naruto simply held up a hand. The piston slammed into his palm. It didn't push him back. It didn't even make him flinch. The piston just stopped. A web of cracks spread through the reinforced steel from the point of impact. With a slight frown of effort, Naruto clenched his fist. The entire pile bunker crumpled like a tin can. The cyborg stared at his ruined arm in disbelief. Impossible. That's reinforced steel. It's not strong enough, Naruto said flatly. He vanished in a flicker of speed, appearing directly in front of the cyborg. Before the man could react, Naruto delivered a precise chop to the back of his neck. The cyborg's eyes rolled up, and his massive body crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The whole encounter had lasted less than 10 seconds. Naruto glanced at the unconscious cyborg and the groaning gifter, then up toward the smokestacks where he could feel a hidden observer. He didn't shout or make a threat. He just met the observer's gaze for a long moment, his own expression one of weary disappointment. Then he turned and walked away. High above, King the Wildfire stood cloaked in shadow, his leather-clad form perfectly still. He had seen everything. Queen's pathetic, transparent ploy. And Naruto's response. The boy, no, the man, hadn't just won. He had won with contemptuous ease, and without any lethal force. He hadn't just defeated Queen's pawns, he had made Queen look like an incompetent fool. This Naruto was not just a powerful brawler. He was controlled. Decisive. And he operated on a level of principle that was utterly foreign to this island. King wasn't sure if that made him a greater asset or a more profound threat. But one thing was certain, the balance of power in Onigashima was changing. That night, sleep did not come easy. The luxury of his room felt more oppressive than ever. As Naruto lay on the floor, he felt the lingering psychic chill from his arrival, a cold spot in the back of his mind that never truly went away. He drifted into an uneasy slumber, and the dream came for him. He was not in Wano. He was standing atop the Hokage monument, looking down on his village. Konoha. It was peaceful, bathed in the warm light of the afternoon sun. But something was wrong. It was too quiet. There were people in the streets. Irika-sensei was walking out of the academy. Shikamaru and Choji were playing shogi under a tree. Sakura was talking with Ino at the flower shop. But they weren't moving. They were frozen, like statues caught in a single moment of time. Their colors were faded, muted, as if the world were a photograph left out in the sun for too long. A profound, soul-crushing dread washed over him. He tried to shout, but no sound came out. He tried to move, to rush down to them, but his feet were rooted to the stone. He looked up at the sky. The sun was gone. In its place, hanging directly over the village, was a black, star-shaped hole in the heavens. It did not radiate darkness, it consumed light. It drank the color, the sound, the life from the world below. It was the silent star. And it was looking at him. I am not a destroyer, the familiar, silent voice echoed in his mind. I am a preserver. I grant the ultimate peace. An end to all noise. An end to all pain. Your world is so quiet now. Naruto's heart shattered. This was his greatest fear realized. Not that his world was destroyed, but that he had failed to protect it. That his greatest enemy had slipped past him and simply silenced it. He woke with a silent gasp, his body drenched in a cold sweat. He was back in the gaudy room in Onigashima, the raucous sounds of the fortress a distant, muffled roar. He sat up, his heart pounding in his chest, the horrifying image of the silent Konoha burned into his mind. He wasn't just lost. He was being hunted. And his hunter had just shown him what was at stake. It wasn't just his life. It was the memory of everything he had ever loved. He was alone, in a land of beasts, with the shadow of a silent god stretching across dimensions to claim him. Chapter 3, The King's Gaze and the Emperor's Decree. The summons came not as a silken invitation or a violent ambush, but as a direct order delivered by a grim-faced headliner whose jaw was permanently locked in a hyena's grin. Kaido wanted to see him. Immediately. Naruto found a Yonko on the grand dais, not in his throne, but standing before a massive, crudely drawn map of Wano spread across a table. The remnants of his breakfast, a roasted sea king carcass and a now empty gourd the size of a boulder, lay discarded nearby. The air around him was heavy with the lingering fumes of sake and absolute authority. King and Queen stood at his flanks, their presence a study in contrasts. Queen was fidgeting, his cybernetic eye whirring as it darted between Naruto and Kaido. King was as still as a statue carved from obsidian, his featureless mask betraying nothing. Naruto, Kaido grunted, not bothering to look up from the map. He jabbed a thick, scarred finger at a region on the western coast. Kuri. The old fool Odin's domain. It's crawling with fleas again. Samurai remnants, starving villagers, a pathetic cocktail of pride and desperation. They've overwhelmed the outpost at Okabor town and are trying to rally others to their foolish cause. He finally lifted his head, his gaze pinning Naruto to the spot. They preach about a prophecy. About the dawn. They are an infection of hope, and hope is a disease in a world like this. It makes the weak believe they have a choice. He straightened up, his shadow swallowing Naruto whole. You are strong. I've seen it. But your strength is clean. Controlled. I want to see its other side. I want to see if you have the stomach for what must be done. The implication was clear. This wasn't just a mission. It was a test of ideology. A loyalty test written in blood. Take them, Kaido gestured with his chin toward a corner of the hall. Ulti and Page 1 stood there, waiting. Ulti's arms were crossed, her expression a mix of defiance and anticipation. She looked like she was being forced to share her favorite weapon. Page 1 just looked tired, as if he'd already run the mission in his head and determined it would be a headache. Go to Kuri, Kaido's voice dropped to a low, dangerous rumble. Crush this rebellion. Make an example of them. Remind the sheep of Wano who their shepherd is. Leave no one standing who still dares to dream of a new dawn. It was a command for a massacre. Naruto's mind flashed back to the villages he had seen in his own world, razed by war, their people slaughtered. He thought of the faces of the children, the despair of the old. Every instinct in his body, every principle he had ever fought for, screamed in protest. He had stood against men who issued such orders. He had never, ever been the one to carry them out. His silence stretched. Queen smirked, sensing a moment of weakness. King's head tilted a fraction of a degree, his unseen eyes focused intently on Naruto. Naruto could refuse. It would be the end of his time here. Kaido did not tolerate disobedience. At best, he'd be imprisoned. At worst, Kaido would take his defiance as a personal challenge and try to break him. He was still recovering, a direct confrontation with a Yonko was suicide. But to agree, to become the monster he had always fought. He found a third path. A razor's edge. I understand, Naruto said, his voice level. He met Kaido's gaze without flinching. The infection must be purged. He used their language. Their rhetoric. But in his mind, a plan was already forming. A dangerous, audacious plan. Kaido grunted, a sound of satisfaction. Good. Don't disappoint me. The flight to Kuri was on the back of a massive, pterodactyl-like creature, one of the many strange beasts in the pirates' employ. Naruto sat near the front, the wind whipping through his hair, his face a mask of cold concentration. Ulti sat a few feet away, pointedly looking in the other direction, while Page 1 huddled behind them, trying to stay out of the wind and the inevitable crossfire. So, you're just gonna do it? Ulti finally snapped, unable to contain herself. Just go and slaughter a bunch of starving farmers. There was an accusatory edge to her voice, but underneath it, something else. A challenge. She was testing him, trying to reconcile the man who had complimented her strength with the man who had just accepted an order for genocide. Kaido's orders were to crush the rebellion and make an example of them, Naruto replied, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Yeah, an example. By turning them all into paste, she retorted. I thought you were one of those soft-hearted idiots. Being soft and being weak aren't the same thing, he said, a cryptic edge to his voice. There are many ways to break a person's spirit. Killing them is just the least imaginative. His words hung in the air between them. Ulti stared at him, a frown creasing her brow. She didn't understand what he meant, but it sent an odd shiver down her spine. It sounded colder, more calculating, than a simple order to kill. Page 1 just pulled his coat tighter, wishing he were anywhere else. They arrived in the region of Kuri to a scene of quiet desperation. Okabor town was a collection of dilapidated shacks clinging to a hillside, a place where the dirt itself seemed weary. The rebels, a mix of gaunt-faced men in mismatched pieces of samurai armor and villagers armed with farming tools, had formed a pathetic defensive line at the town's entrance. They were malnourished, exhausted, but their eyes burned with a desperate, defiant fire. A man who appeared to be their leader, an older samurai with a proud, weathered face, stepped forward. Beast pirates. This is as far as you go. This land belongs to the Kazuki clan. We will not bow to a tyrant any longer. A ragged cheer went up from the small band behind him. It was a courageous, and utterly suicidal, display. Ulti cracked her knuckles, a savage grin spreading across her face. All right, let's get this over with. I'll take the loudmouth. Wait, Naruto said, holding up a hand. He stepped forward, alone, walking calmly toward the rebel line. The samurai tensed, his hand gripping the hilt of his katana. What do you want, demon? Naruto stopped about 50 feet from them. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't make a threat. He just looked at them, his gaze sweeping over their thin faces, their worn-out clothes, the children peeking from behind broken-down walls. He saw their defiance, but beneath it, he saw the gnawing hunger and the profound despair. Your courage is admirable, Naruto said, his voice carrying easily across the distance. But it is misplaced. You cannot win. We would rather die on our feet than live on our knees, the samurai roared. I know, Naruto said softly. And in that moment, he wasn't a beast pirate. He was Naruto Uzumaki, a man who understood the fire of rebellion better than anyone. He understood their pain. And that's why he had to extinguish their hope, quickly and completely. You speak of the dawn, Naruto continued, his voice rising, imbued with a sliver of chakra to ensure everyone in the valley could hear him. You put your faith in prophecies and dreams. You believe your will can change the world. Let me show you what true will looks like. Let me show you the difference between a dream and reality. He turned away from them, facing a barren, rocky mountain that loomed over the valley to the east. The mountain was a solid mass of stone, thousands of tons of rock that had stood for millennia. From the back, Ulti watched, confused. What's he doing? Is he gonna give them a lecture? Naruto held up his right hand. A low, whining hum began to fill the air, a sound like a million cicadas screaming at once. A small, black point of chakra formed in his palm, then rapidly expanded into a four-pointed, shuriken-like shape of swirling, razor-sharp wind. It spun with such impossible velocity that it distorted the air around it, a miniature hurricane of pure cutting power. Wind style, Raisin Shuriken. The rebels stared, their defiance wavering, replaced by a primal fear. The sheer, destructive energy radiating from the spinning shuriken was unlike anything they had ever felt. It felt like the air itself was being torn apart. Up on the pterodactyl, Page One's eyes were wide with terror. What is that thing? Ulti was speechless. The Rasengan she had seen him use on Jackie was a hammer. This was something else entirely. It was a scalpel designed to dissect creation itself. Naruto didn't throw it at the town. He didn't even look at the rebels. With a grunt of effort, he hurled the Raisin Shuriken at the mountain. It flew through the air, a screaming disk of death, and struck the base of the mountain. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the world dissolved into a maelstrom of white light and deafening noise. An immense dome of swirling, blade-like wind erupted from the point of impact, expanding rapidly. It didn't explode. It disintegrated. Millions upon millions of microscopic wind blades attacked the mountain on a cellular level, severing the bonds between the very atoms of the rock. The mountain didn't crumble. It didn't explode. It simply ceased to be. A third of the massive mountain vanished, atomized into dust and blown away on a wind of its own creation. Where a solid wall of rock had stood, there was now a perfectly carved, concave valley, its surface unnaturally smooth, as if scooped out by the hand of a god. The sound, when it finally hit, was a cataclysmic roar that shook the entire island of Wano, a deep, resonant boom that was felt more than it was heard. The shockwave, a hurricane-force wind, blasted through the valley. The rebels were thrown from their feet, their shacks torn from their foundations, the very ground trembling beneath them. When the dust began to settle, there was only silence. The rebels, bruised and terrified, slowly picked themselves up. They stared, their faces slack with disbelief, at the place where the mountain had been. At the impossible new valley carved into the landscape. Naruto stood exactly where he had been, unmoved by the tempest he had unleashed. He lowered his arm, his expression cold and unyielding. He turned back to them. Their defiance was gone. Their pride was shattered. Their hope was a tiny, guttering ember in the face of an apocalyptic reality. In their eyes was a new emotion, absolute, soul-crushing terror. They weren't looking at a man. They were looking at a natural disaster. That, Naruto said, his voice a cold whisper on the wind, was a warning. That was a fraction of my power. The next one will not be aimed at a mountain. The rebellion is over. The dream of the dawn is dead. Go back to your homes. Live. The samurai, his face pale as a ghost, dropped his katana. It clattered on the ground, the sound unnaturally loud in the profound silence. One by one, the other rebels dropped their weapons. They had been prepared to die. But they had no context for this kind of power. This was not a battle. This was a god swatting a fly. The mission was complete. The rebellion was crushed. An example had been made. Not a single person had been harmed. Naruto turned his back on them and walked away. But as he passed the shattered remains of the town's entrance, out of sight of Ulti and Page 1, he paused. He pressed his hand to the ground. A faint, green glow, almost imperceptible, pulsed from his palm into the earth. The creation of all things. A subtle manipulation of life force. He didn't create a feast out of thin air. That would be too obvious. Instead, he accelerated the natural processes. The seeds buried in the parched earth would sprout overnight. The nearly barren fruit trees would bear fruit by morning. The underground wells, long dry, would begin to seep with fresh, clean water. It wasn't a miracle. It was a nudge. A secret act of defiance hidden within an act of overwhelming intimidation. He walked back toward the waiting pterodactyl without a word. Ulti stared at him, her mouth slightly agape. The sheer, casual scale of destruction he had just unleashed was staggering. It was on par with one of Kaido-sama's own tantrums. But the way he did it, the cold precision, the strategic goal, it was terrifyingly effective. She watched him walk past, and for the first time, she felt a genuine spike of fear. And an even more genuine spike of awe. He had followed his orders to the letter, but in his own, terrifying way. Their return to Onigashima was met with an unsettling quiet. The news of the tremor that had shaken Kuri had already arrived. The pirates whispered, wondering what could have caused it. As Naruto, Ulti, and Page 1 entered the main hall, all eyes fell on them. The usual chaos was muted. At the foot of the dais, King was waiting for them. His arms were crossed, his masked face tilted toward Naruto. The rebellion in Kuri is over, King stated, his voice a flat, metallic rasp. The reports say a mountain in the west has been reshaped. Explain. I made an example of them, Naruto replied, his tone equally flat. Kaido-sana's orders were to leave no one standing, King pressed, his voice sharp with accusation. Our informants in the town say there were no casualties. A murmur went through the assembled pirates. No casualties? That wasn't how the beast pirates operated. He's right. Ulti suddenly snapped, stepping forward to stand beside Naruto. There were no casualties. Because they all surrendered before we had to kill anyone. He blew up a damn mountain. You think anyone's gonna fight after seeing that? They were on their knees, crying. It was pathetic. She was defending him, aggressively, her loyalty shifting in real time. King's masked gaze shifted from her to Naruto. You showed mercy. Mercy is weakness. It inspires defiance, not fear. Is it mercy to let a man live in terror? Naruto shot back, his voice cutting through the hall. I didn't give them a noble death to inspire songs and martyrs. I gave them a reason to fear the sky itself. I broke their will to fight. That is a deeper wound than any sword can inflict. Their children will tell stories about the golden demon who unmade a mountain. That fear will last for generations. That is true control. The hall was silent. The pirates were listening, their simple, violent minds grappling with a new concept. The idea of psychological warfare, of breaking an enemy so completely they didn't even need to be killed. You twist your compassion into a tool of terror, King said, his voice low. You think you are so different from us, but you use your power to dominate, just as we do. There's a difference between a boot on the neck and a sword hanging over it, Naruto countered. One is about punishment. The other is about control. I am here to ensure Kaido's rule is absolute. I just have a more efficient way of doing it. Their ideologies clashed in the open, a battle of wills played out before the entire crew. King, the champion of absolute, brutal force. Naruto, the proponent of overwhelming, psychological dominance. Enough. The single word was a physical blow. Kaido had been listening, unseen, from the balcony above his throne. He landed on the dais with a ground-shaking thud, a wide, predatory grin on his face. He was ecstatic. "The boy is right, King." Kaido boomed, clapping a hand on Naruto's shoulder that was heavy enough to buckle a normal man's knees. Naruto stood firm. "Worororo. I wanted an example, and he gave me a legend. A story they will tell for 100 years. It's magnificent." He turned to the assembled crew, his voice a roar. "This is a new kind of strength. The strength to win a war without fighting a battle. I like it." He looked at Naruto, his eyes gleaming with a frightening mix of pride and ambition. "King, Queen, Jack. You are my calamities. My right hands. The pillars of my crew." He then pointed a massive thumb at Naruto. "From this day forward, Naruto is my fist. A new position, above the Tobi Rappo, equal to the calamities themselves. He is the all-star, Naruto the Golden Fox. His word is my word." The proclamation was a thunderbolt. Queen's jaw dropped, his face turning a shade of purple. King's body went rigid, the only sign of his shock. To create a new rank, equal to his own, for this upstart who had been here for less than 2 weeks, it was unprecedented. It was a fundamental shift in the power structure of the most powerful crew in the world. Naruto had not just passed his test. He had redefined the rules of the game and been rewarded with a crown. That evening, the fortress was even more chaotic than usual. A banquet had been declared in honor of the new all-star. The pirates, who needed little excuse to celebrate, were in a frenzy. Naruto, however, had slipped away from the main hall. He stood on the same quiet ledge he used for his morning meditations, looking out over the dark, churning sea. The promotion meant nothing to him. The title was hollow. All he had done was prove he could be a more effective monster. The secret act of kindness in Curry felt like a drop of clean water in a toxic ocean. "Hiding from your own party." The voice was low and smoky. He turned to see Black Maria approaching, her towering form silhouetted against the lantern-lit fortress. She moved with a silent grace that belied her size. "It's too loud," he said simply. She stopped beside him, her fragrant scent cutting through the salty air. "You've shaken the foundation of this island, Naruto-san. Queen is furious. King is, calculating. You've made powerful enemies." "They were my enemies the moment I arrived," he replied. "True," she conceded, a soft smile on her lips. "But now you have power. A title. That changes things." She leaned against the railing, her gaze fixed on his profile. "To destroy a mountain to save a town. It's a beautiful, terrible kind of poetry. You are a paradox, Naruto. A tyrant with the heart of a savior." Before he could respond, another voice, sharp and angry, cut through the night. "What are you doing with him, you giant spider witch?" Ulti stomped onto the ledge, her fists clenched. She glared at Black Maria, then at Naruto. "They're cheering for you down there, you idiot. This is your celebration. And you're up here canoodling with her." "Canoodling?" Black Maria chuckled, her eyes sparkling with mischief. My, Ulti-chan. Such a vulgar word. We were having a civil conversation. You should try it sometime." "Shut up." Ulti snapped, her face flushing. She turned her glare back to Naruto. "Kaido-sama gave you a title. You should be down there, acting like you deserve it." "And what does that look like?" Naruto asked, a hint of weariness in his tone. "Drinking until I can't stand. Picking a fight with the first person who looks at me wrong." "Yes. Exactly." Ulti shouted, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Naruto sighed, running a hand through his hair. He was standing on a cliffside on a skull-shaped island, being lectured on proper pirate etiquette by a dinosaur woman and a spider woman who both seemed to have a vested, and competing, interest in him. The sheer absurdity of his new life was overwhelming. Black Maria watched the exchange with amusement, her fan hiding her smile. Ulti was so transparent in her jealousy, it was almost adorable. "He's not interested in your brutish festivities, little one," Maria said smoothly. "He requires a more sophisticated companion." Sophisticated? You mean you want to wrap him in your creepy webs and suck him dry? Ulti shot back. "Jealousy is such an ugly color on you, dear." "I'm not jealous." As they bickered, their competing desires for his attention became a palpable force, a crackling energy in the air. They weren't just arguing with each other, they were performing for him, each trying to stake her claim. Naruto stood between them, utterly bewildered. He had faced down armies, gods, and monsters. He had negotiated peace between warring nations. But this was a battlefield for which he had absolutely no training. He looked from Ulti's furious, flustered face to Black Maria's amused, predatory one, and felt a headache beginning to form. His life had just become infinitely more complicated. Chapter 4, A Banquet of Beasts. The banquet in Naruto's honor was not a celebration, it was a force of nature. Onagashima's main hall had been transformed into a vortex of controlled chaos, a testament to the beast pirate's singular philosophy: live loud, fight hard, and die drunk. The air, thick with the smell of roasted sea king and enough spilled sake to float a battleship, vibrated with the roar of 1,000 unrestrained voices. A band of mismatched musicians on a high platform played a discordant, percussive war anthem that served as the night's heartbeat. Naruto found himself at the center of it all, seated at the high table to Kaido's left, the spot where King usually sat. The unspoken message was not lost on anyone. King was now seated to Kaido's right, his masked face unreadable, but the tension in his shoulders was a tangible thing. Queen, further down the table, was pointedly engaged in a drinking contest with a subordinate, slamming down barrel-sized mugs with a theatricality that bordered on desperation, trying to reclaim the crowd's attention. Naruto felt like an actor in a play he hadn't rehearsed. Pirates, from the lowest-ranking pleasures to the hulking gifters, approached him in a steady stream. They didn't offer polite congratulations, they issued challenges. All-Star Sama, a gifter with massive crab claws for hands, bellowed, shoving a huge porcelain bowl of sake into Naruto's face. "Drink with me. Prove you're not just some pretty-faced trickster." Naruto looked at the bowl, then at the pirate's expectant, drunken leer. Refusing would be an insult. It would be seen as weakness. He took the bowl. The sake was crude, burning a trail of fire down his throat, but he drained it in one long swallow, his Uzumaki constitution barely registering the alcohol. He slammed the empty bowl down on the table, the crack echoing in a momentary lull. The crabman's eyes went wide. Then he threw his head back and roared with laughter, clapping Naruto on the back with a claw that could have sheared through steel. "He can drink. The golden fox can drink." The cheer that went up was one of genuine acceptance. He had passed another, simpler test. This pattern repeated itself throughout the early hours of the banquet. He was challenged to arm wrestling matches, which he won without effort, his hand unmoving against the straining muscles of men twice his size. He was challenged to duels, which he ended non-lethally with a single, precise strike that left his opponent unconscious but unharmed. With each victory, the respect of the crew grew. They didn't understand his restraint, but they understood his power. He wasn't one of them, not really, but he was undeniably strong, and in their world, that was more than enough. He was winning them over not with charisma, but with sheer, undeniable competence. He moved through the chaos, a calm island in a sea of pandemonium. He saw Ulti across the hall, holding court with a group of headliners. She was loud, abrasive, and drinking everyone under the table, but her eyes kept flicking toward him, a scowl on her face every time he accepted another challenge. He was stealing her spotlight, and she hated it. He felt a presence at his elbow, a subtle shift in the air that was more than just another drunken pirate. It was Black Maria. She had seemingly materialized from the shadows, a vision of silken elegance amidst the squalor. She held 2 delicate cups and a bottle of what looked like far more refined sake than the swill being passed around. "You look weary, Naruto-san," she purred, her voice a low counterpoint to the surrounding roar. "This must all be so brutish for you." "It's loud," he repeated his earlier sentiment, his gaze sweeping over the brawling, feasting pirates. "Come," she said, her fingers lightly brushing his arm. The touch was electric, a promise of something more than just conversation. "Let us find a quieter place. The view from the eastern balcony is exquisite tonight. And the sake is much better." She didn't wait for an answer, simply turned and began to walk, weaving through the crowd with an impossible grace. The pirates, even in their drunken stupor, parted for her as if by instinct. It was a summons, not a request. Intrigued, and frankly desperate for a moment of quiet, Naruto followed. She led him through a series of corridors, away from the thunderous heart of the banquet hall. The noise faded, replaced by the distant sound of the wind and the faint, haunting melody of a lone shamisen player. They emerged onto a wide, stone balcony carved into the side of the great skull. The moon, a perfect silver disk, hung in the sky, its light glinting off the dark, churning waves hundreds of feet below. The contrast with the hall was staggering. Out here, there was a profound sense of peace, a quiet majesty that made the chaos inside seem small and insignificant. Black Maria leaned against the stone balustrade, pouring the clear liquid into the 2 small cups. She handed one to him. "From my private reserve. It has a gentler soul than what Kaido-sama prefers." Naruto took a sip. It was smooth, with a complex, floral note. It tasted of civilization. "It's good," he admitted. She smiled, a genuine, soft expression that was worlds away from her usual predatory grin. "I am glad you think so." She took a sip from her own cup, her dark eyes studying him over the rim. "You handle them well. The beasts in the hall. You have the patience of a saint." "I grew up in a world of soldiers," Naruto said, his gaze on the horizon. "I'm used to loud, violent people." "But they are not your people, are they?" she asked softly. He didn't answer for a moment. He just stared out at the endless sea. "No," he finally said, the word barely a whisper. "They're not." The confession, simple and raw, hung in the air between them. It was an admission of his profound loneliness, a crack in the invincible facade he presented to the world. Black Maria moved closer. She was so tall that she could look down at him, but she didn't. She simply stood beside him, her presence a warm, comforting weight in the cool night air. "I know something of what that feels like," she said, her voice losing its playful, seductive edge, replaced by a surprising melancholy. "To be surrounded by people, yet to feel utterly alone. To build a beautiful cage for yourself, because you fear the wilderness outside." Her words were a direct reference to their first conversation. She was no longer playing a game. She was offering a piece of herself, a genuine moment of connection. "This place," she gestured with her cup toward the fortress behind them, "it is a haven for monsters, for those who are too strong, too strange, too broken for the outside world. We are all runaways here, Naruto-san. We have all, in our own way, lost our homes." Naruto turned to look at her. In the moonlight, he could see the faintest traces of sadness in her eyes, a deep, ancient sorrow that her smiles and games could never completely hide. He saw the story of a girl who had to grow too tall, too strong, too dangerous, just to survive, and in doing so, had isolated herself from everyone. "What did you run from?" he asked, his voice gentle. She was silent for a long moment, her gaze distant. "I was born on a poor island," she began, her voice a low murmur. "I was different. Always too big. The other children feared me. The adults coveted me. They saw me not as a person, but as a prize to be sold, a curiosity to be displayed. She took a shuddering breath. So I became something to be feared instead. I learned to spin webs. I learned to use my beauty as a weapon and my size as a shield. I found my way here, where being a monster is a virtue. Kaido-sama gave me a home, a purpose. He saw my strength and nothing else. And I have been grateful for that. She turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his. But it is a lonely strength, is it not? To be so powerful that no one can ever truly get close to you. In that moment, Naruto saw past the Tobi Rappo, past the spider, past the seductress. He saw a lonely woman who had built a fortress of webs and charms around a deeply wounded heart. He reached out, his calloused fingers gently touching her cheek. Her skin was as smooth as silk. She flinched, her eyes widening in surprise, but she didn't pull away. "You're not a monster, Maria," he said, using her name without the honorific for the first time. "You're just a person who learned to bite before she could be bitten." A single, perfect tear traced a path down her cheek, shimmering in the moonlight. She leaned into his touch, her carefully constructed composure finally crumbling. No one had ever offered her such simple, unconditional empathy. They wanted her body, her influence, her power. He was the first person to simply see her. The moment was intimate, fragile, and utterly silent. It was a dance of a different kind, not of seduction or wit, but of two lonely souls finding a moment of shared understanding. She raised a hand, her long, elegant fingers covering his on her cheek. And then the moment was shattered. "Get your filthy paws off him." The shriek was pure, unfiltered rage. Ulti stormed onto the balcony, her face a mask of fury, her two-toned hair seeming to bristle with indignation. She was breathing heavily, her chest heaving. She was drunk, but it was a clear-eyed, focused kind of drunkenness, the kind that only amplified her already volatile emotions. Black Maria sighed, pulling away from Naruto, her composure snapping back into place like a mask. The moment was gone. "Ulti-chan," she said, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness. "Can't you see the adults are talking? I saw what you were doing." Ulti snarled, jabbing a finger at her. "Trying to sink your fangs into him. He's not one of your pathetic little toys." She grabbed Naruto's arm, her grip surprisingly strong, and yanked him away from Maria. "You're with me." "Ulti, what are you doing?" Naruto asked, bewildered by the sudden shift in atmosphere. "Shut up," she snapped, not looking at him. She dragged him back into the corridors of the fortress, her stomping footsteps echoing in the silence. It wasn't a graceful retreat like Maria's, it was a chaotic, forceful abduction. She pulled him through winding hallways and down flights of stairs, her grip on his arm never loosening. Her rage was a palpable aura around her. They ended up in a deserted corridor, far from the noise of the banquet and the quiet of the balcony. It was a stark, functional hallway, lit by a single, flickering torch. She finally let him go, shoving him back against the cold stone wall. She stood in front of him, her fists clenched, her shoulders shaking. She was glaring at him, but her eyes were shining with unshed tears. "What is wrong with you?" she demanded, her voice thick with a confusing mix of anger and hurt. "What did I do?" Naruto asked, genuinely lost. You just let her. You let her touch you, look at you like that. Like you're some prize she won," she choked out. "And you looked at her like you actually liked it." "She was just talking to me," Naruto said, trying to reason with her. "No, she wasn't." Ulti shouted, taking a step closer, jabbing him in the chest. "She was trying to wrap you up in her stupid webs. That's what she does. She finds something strong and shiny and she traps it. And you're too stupid to see it." "I can take care of myself," he said, his patience wearing thin. "No, you can't. You're an idiot," she yelled, her voice cracking. You walk around here like you're above it all calm and powerful, but you're just a big, stupid, soft-hearted moron. You blow up a mountain so you don't have to hurt anyone. You let me hit you. You give me advice. Who does that? It's infuriating. Tears were openly streaming down her face now, carving paths through the grime and sweat on her cheeks. She was a tangled mess of rage, jealousy, and a profound confusion she couldn't articulate. I hate you, she screamed, pounding a fist against his chest. The blow was solid, but held none of her true power. It was the desperate strike of a frustrated child. I hate how you just showed up and everyone thinks you're so great. I hate how you look at me like I'm not just some psycho brawler. I hate how you make me feel weak. She looked up at him, her tear-filled eyes wide and desperate, searching for an answer to a question she didn't know how to ask. He wasn't just a rival. He wasn't just an annoyance. He was something that had entered her violent, straightforward world and turned it completely upside down. He challenged her, he respected her, and he confused her on a fundamental level. And before Naruto could process the raw, painful confession, before he could offer a word of comfort or confusion, she lunged forward. She silenced him with a kiss. It wasn't gentle or tender. It was like everything else about her, fierce, clumsy, and overwhelmingly passionate. It was a bruising, desperate kiss, full of anger and frustration and a raw, undeniable wanting. Her hands grabbed the front of his jacket, pulling him down to her, her body pressed against his. For a moment, Naruto was too stunned to react. His mind, which could process the complexities of a battlefield in a nanosecond, ground to a halt. He was being kissed, in a hallway, by a drunken dinosaur woman who had just confessed to hating him. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the kiss ended. She pulled back, her face flushed, her eyes wide as if she were as surprised by her own actions as he was. They stood there, inches apart, breathing heavily, the air thick with unspoken emotions. The moment was shattered not by a voice, but by a sound. A shrill, piercing alarm began to blare throughout the fortress. It wasn't the drunken roar of a brawl getting out of hand. It was the high, urgent tone of a full-scale alert. Red lights began to flash in the corridor, bathing them in a hellish, pulsating glow. Heavy footsteps pounded down the hall as beast pirates, their faces grim and suddenly sober, ran past them, heading for the outer walls. What is it? Ulti asked, her personal turmoil instantly forgotten, her pirate instincts taking over. Marines? Another crew? A gifter with the head of a boar skidded to a halt beside them. Worse. A ship. It just appeared. Off the western coast. Appeared? Naruto asked, his blood running cold. No flag, no sails, no signs of life, the pirate panted, his eyes wide with fear. It's just, drifting. But the lookouts who saw it, they said the sea around it went dead calm and the air got cold. Naruto didn't need to hear any more. The cold. The silence. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, what it was. His past had found him. He pushed past the pirate and broke into a run, Ulti right on his heels. They burst out onto the main battlements of Onigashima. The banquet was over. The entire crew was assembled, staring out at the sea. Kaido himself stood at the edge, his massive form radiating a dangerous curiosity. Naruto followed their gaze. There, on the unnaturally still water, was a ship. It was a derelict, a vessel of rotting wood and tattered rigging, looking as if it had been at the bottom of the sea for a century. It drifted silently, shrouded in a faint, eerie mist. And on its deck, figures were standing. They were pale, their skin the color of bleached bone. Their clothes were the rags of drowned sailors. They stood perfectly still, their heads all tilted at the same unnatural angle. And as one, they turned their heads toward Onigashima. Their eyes glowed with a cold, dead, white light. These weren't men. They were puppets. husks animated by a power that was utterly alien to this world. Naruto felt it instantly, the same chilling, void-like energy as the silent star. These were its agents. Its hunters. As if sensing his recognition, one of the figures on the deck raised a hand and pointed directly at him, across a mile of open water. There was no sound, but Naruto felt a wave of pure, silent malice wash over him, a telepathic message that was colder and sharper than any spoken word. We have found you, anomaly. The silence is coming. The hunt had begun. Chapter 5. The brand of the silent star. The silence from the derelict ship was more terrifying than any war cry. It was an active, predatory quiet that seemed to suck the sound from the air. The usual boisterous energy of the beast pirates had evaporated, replaced by a tense, uneasy watchfulness. These new arrivals didn't radiate ambition or bloodlust, they radiated nothing. They were a hole in the world, and it was deeply unsettling. What in the hell are they? Queen muttered, his usual bravado replaced by a scientist's frustrated curiosity. He peered through a massive, steam-powered telescope, his brow furrowed. My readings are all over the place. No body heat. No biosignatures. It's like looking at a ship full of corpses that forgot to lie down. Kaido just grinned, a low, rumbling chuckle building in his chest. Worororo. Interesting. They have the smell of death about them, but they stand. Let's give them a proper Onigashima welcome. He opened his mouth, drawing in a colossal breath. The air shimmered with heat as brilliant orange energy gathered in his throat. He was preparing a blast breath, a casual attack for him, but one capable of obliterating a mountain. Wait! Naruto shouted, a sharp urgency in his voice that made even Kaido pause. Don't! That won't work. Before Kaido could question him, the figures on the ship moved. They didn't run or leap. They simply flowed. They poured over the side of their rotting vessel like a cascade of water, hitting the surface of the sea and continuing their charge without breaking stride. They ran across the water, their feet making no sound, leaving no wake, their movements unnaturally smooth and fast. They're coming, a lookout screamed. The pirates on the battlements roared, a mix of fear and excitement. Cannons were loaded. Rifles were aimed. This was a language they understood. Fire. A volley of cannonballs screamed toward the approaching horde. The pale figures didn't dodge or swerve. They simply raised their hands. As the cannonballs, each one a payload of explosive iron, drew near, they seemed to dissolve. They didn't explode. They didn't deflect. They just vanished into shimmering motes of dust a foot away from the figures' palms, their kinetic energy completely and silently nullified. A wave of stunned disbelief washed over the battlements. What was that? Ulti breathed, her eyes wide. Some kind of devil fruit? No, Naruto said, his body tense, his gaze locked on the approaching figures. It's worse. The figures reached the base of the island and began to run straight up the sheer, rocky cliffs, defying gravity with the same eerie silence. They moved with the inexorable purpose of insects, their glowing white eyes fixed on the fortress above. Repel them. King commanded, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. The beast pirates, shaking off their shock, met the attackers as they swarmed over the battlements. The fight was immediate, brutal, and deeply, fundamentally wrong. A gifter with the arms of a bear swung a devastating blow at one of the pale figures. The agent didn't block, it simply let the blow connect. But upon impact, there was no crunch of bone. The gifter's arm seemed to pass through the creature as if it were smoke, and the gifter himself let out a choked scream, collapsing to his knees. His powerful bare arm hung limp and useless, a strange, gray pallor spreading up his skin from the point of contact. His vitality, his very life force, was being drained away. Elsewhere, a headliner who had eaten a smile fruit, giving him the ability to spit venomous darts from his mouth, unleashed a volley at an agent. The darts dissolved in mid-air, just as the cannonballs had. The agent responded by touching him on the chest. The headliner's body went rigid, his Zoan features receding as he fell to the ground, unconscious, his devil fruit powers seemingly short-circuited. Panic began to set in. Their brute force was ineffective. Their devil fruits were being neutralized. These things weren't fighting, they were eroding reality. Naruto knew he couldn't wait any longer. This enemy was his, and his alone. Everyone, fall back. Don't let them touch you, he commanded, his voice imbued with chakra, rolling over the battlefield like thunder. The pirates, already faltering, looked at him, their eyes wide with fear. He drew in a deep breath, molding the natural energy around him. Orange pigment flowed around his eyes, the signature of Sage Mode. The world snapped into focus with a new, vibrant clarity. He could see the corrupted, dead energy animating the pale figures. He could also see the life force of the beast pirates flickering and draining wherever the agents touched them. He formed a Rasengan in his palm, but this one was different. He poured natural energy into it, shaping it into a sage art, massive Rasengan. The swirling sphere of power grew to the size of a boulder, radiating an aura of pure, vibrant life. He leaped from the battlement, a golden blur, and slammed down into the thickest concentration of the enemy. The impact was not an explosion of force, but of life. The vibrant, natural energy of the Rasengan was anathema to the void-like energy of the agents. When it struck them, they didn't just disintegrate, they screamed. It was a high, thin, psychic shriek that tore through the minds of everyone on the island. They convulsed, their forms flickering violently before dissolving into black dust that blew away on the wind. It worked. Natural energy was the key. Naruto became a whirlwind of golden light and righteous power. He moved through the enemy ranks, a blur of motion. He didn't need complex jutsu. A simple punch infused with sage energy was enough to make an agent dissolve. A kick imbued with the power of nature could erase three at once. He was the perfect counter to them, a living embodiment of the life they sought to extinguish. The beast pirates, who had fallen back, watched in stunned awe. They had seen his power before, but this was different. This wasn't a show of force. This was a purge. He was a guardian deity, a wrathful spirit of nature, cleansing their home of an unknowable blight. Ulti watched from the parapet, her earlier confusion and anger forgotten, replaced by a fierce, primal sense of pride. That was her, idiot. He was magnificent. Beside her, Black Maria stood, her fan held tight in her hand, her knuckles white. She watched him fight, a terrifying, beautiful god of destruction and protection, and felt a possessive thrill that was stronger than any she had ever known. Naruto fought his way toward the center of the swarm, where one figure stood out from the rest. It was larger, its form more stable, and the cold aura around it was significantly more powerful. This was the leader. The one that had pointed at him. As he approached, the lead agent raised its hand. The other agents stopped their attacks and flowed back, forming a silent circle around the two of them. It was a challenge. The agent's body shimmered, and it spoke, its voice a chorus of 100 drowned sailors, a dry, rasping sound like sand on stone. Uzumaki. The anomaly. Your existence is a discordant note in the grand symphony of silence. You will be erased. You can try, Naruto said, his sage mode flaring. He charged. The agent met his advance. Their first blow connected, a fist of pure life energy against a palm of absolute void. A shockwave, not of sound or force, but of conflicting realities, erupted from the point of impact. The stone beneath their feet fractured. The air itself seemed to tear. Naruto felt a horrifying, draining sensation as the agent's touch tried to siphon his life force, while the agent itself recoiled as if burned by the vibrant energy of his sage chakra. They exchanged a flurry of blows, a dance of creation and uncreation. Naruto was faster, stronger, a master martial artist. But the agent was relentless, feeling no pain, no fatigue. And every time it managed to touch him, he felt that sickening drain. He saw an opening. He feinted a high kick, and as the agent moved to block, Naruto spun, driving his heel into its midsection. The blow connected solidly. The agent's body dissolved into black dust. But it had been a trap. In the instant before it was destroyed, the agent had lunged forward, its hand outstretched. Its fingers, cold and dead, brushed against Naruto's right forearm. Naruto felt a pain unlike any he had ever known. It was not a cut, or a burn, or a break. It was a feeling of erasure. An ice-cold, searing agony shot up his arm as the agent's void energy was injected directly into him. He cried out, stumbling back, clutching his arm. The last of the agents dissolved, their purpose fulfilled. The attack was over. The eerie silence was replaced by the roar of the wind and the shocked gasps of the pirates. Naruto stood panting, his arm on fire. He looked down. On his forearm, where the agent had touched him, was a brand. It was a swirling, black spiral, like a miniature galaxy with no stars. It wasn't a tattoo, it seemed to be a part of his very skin, a wound in reality itself. It pulsed with a cold, dark light, and he could feel it, a parasite latched onto his chakra network, slowly, methodically, drinking his energy. It was a beacon. A marker. So the silent star would never lose him again. The aftermath of the attack left Onigashima in a state of high alert. The banquet was forgotten. The wounded, dozens of pirates who had been touched by the agents, were taken to Queen's advanced medical facilities. They weren't physically injured, but their life force had been drained, leaving them weak and listless, their devil fruit abilities sputtering and unreliable. Queen was in a frenzy of scientific fury, unable to comprehend the illness that afflicted them. In Kaido's throne room, a council of war was held. Kaido, King, Queen, and Jack, the three calamities, stood before Naruto. The mood was grim. So, Kaido said, his voice a low growl. Explain. What in the hell were those things? Naruto, his right arm wrapped in bandages that did nothing to conceal the cold aura emanating from it, explained everything. He told them about the silent star, the entity of anti-existence. He told them how it had thrown him from his world. He told them that those agents were its puppets, and that they were hunting him. And this god of yours, King interjected, his voice laced with suspicion, its energy negates devil fruits. It seems to, Naruto confirmed. It's an energy of non-existence. It unravels complex energies like whatever powers your devil fruits. It's also why it's so vulnerable to natural energy. Sage mode is the power of life itself. It's the polar opposite. Queen, who had been analyzing a sample of the black dust from the disintegrated agents, slammed his fist on a console. It makes no sense. This material has no atomic structure. It breaks the laws of physics. It's fascinating. Disgusting, but fascinating. Kaido ignored him. He walked up to Naruto and stared down at his bandaged arm. And that mark? It's from them? Naruto nodded. It's a beacon. So it can find me. And it's feeding on my chakra. He could feel it even now, a slow, constant drain, like a wound that would never close. Kaido was silent for a long moment. King and Queen expected him to be angry, to cast out the source of this new, incomprehensible threat. Instead, a slow, wide, terrifying grin spread across his face. A god. He mused, his eyes gleaming with a mad light. An enemy that can negate devil fruits, that cannot be destroyed by normal means, and that seeks to erase all of existence. He looked at Naruto, his grin widening. You've brought me a worthy opponent, Naruto. A real fight. This is the most exciting thing to happen in decades. Far from being afraid, Kaido was thrilled. The prospect of a battle against a cosmic horror was, to him, the ultimate challenge. As long as you are here, this island is a target, King stated, his tone pragmatic. Your problem has become our problem. Exactly. Kaido boomed. And we are the beast pirates. We do not run from a fight. This silent star wants our golden fox. It will have to come through me. He turned to Naruto. Your fight is now our fight. We will protect you. Not out of kindness, but because I want to smash this so-called god's face in myself. The declaration was absolute. By making himself Naruto's enemy, the silent star had just made itself the enemy of a Yonko. The defense of Naruto was now a matter of pride and self-preservation for the entire crew. Later, in his quarters, Naruto sat on the floor, the bandages off, staring at the swirling black brand on his arm. It was cold to the touch, and the skin around it was pale. The drain was noticeable, a constant tax on his reserves. He tried to force his own chakra into it, to overwhelm it, but the brand simply absorbed it like a sponge. He tried to use his sage energy to purify it, but it was like trying to use water to douse a fire made of oil, it only seemed to make it flare with a cold, dark intensity. He sensed it would be foolish to try and cut it out. The energy was too volatile. He had a chilling certainty that if he tried to physically remove it, the brand would detonate with enough force to take out half of Onigashima. He was trapped. Branded. A walking target for an interdimensional predator. The door to his suite slid open. He didn't need to look up to know who it was. He sensed them both. Ulti and Black Maria entered, their usual rivalry absent, replaced by a shared, palpable concern. They had put their jealousy on hold in the face of a common threat to their interest. How is it? Maria asked, her voice soft as she knelt beside him, her eyes fixed on the ugly black mark. It's cold, Naruto said simply. Ulti stomped over, peering at his arm with a frown. Queen's moron doctors have no idea what to do they? No one does, Naruto replied. This isn't a wound. It's a parasite. Ulti growled in frustration. She hated feeling helpless. She looked at Naruto, at the weary lines around his eyes, and a fierce, protective instinct welled up inside her. Well, you're not getting rid of us, she declared, plopping down on the floor next to him with a decisive thud. If those pasty-faced freaks come back, we'll be here. Black Maria smiled, a small, genuine smile. She settled on his other side, her movements as graceful as Ulti's had been clumsy. She's right. You are not facing this alone. They sat with him in silence, a strange, triangular bastion against the coming darkness. Naruto looked from Ulti's fierce, determined scowl to Maria's calm, watchful gaze. He had been in this world for only a short time, but in this moment, surrounded by these two volatile, dangerous, and fiercely loyal women, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt since he left his own world. A sense of belonging. He looked back down at the brand on his arm. The cold, draining presence was still there. But now, he felt something else, too. A new resolve. If he couldn't remove it, he would do what he had always done with the monstrous power inside him. He would tame it. He would master it. He would make it his own. He remembered the long, arduous years of learning to control Kurama's power, of turning the fox's hatred into a partnership. This was the same. A hostile power, latched onto his soul. He would not let it consume him. He would absorb it, merge its void-like energy with his own life-filled chakra. It was a terrifying, dangerous gambit. The fusion of such opposing forces could tear him apart from the inside. But it was the only path he could see. He would take this curse, this brand from a silent god, and forge it into a new sword. He closed his eyes, focusing inward, beginning the long, perilous process of turning poison into power. And on either side of him, two of the most dangerous women in the world kept watch, ready to tear apart anything that dared to interrupt him. Chapter 6, Whispers in the Capital. The days following the attack settled into a tense, watchful quiet. The pale agents did not return, but their memory haunted Onigashima like a phantom limb. The brand on Naruto's arm remained a cold, constant reality, a slow leak in his vast reservoir of chakra. He spent his long hours in meditation, not fighting the brand, but studying it, learning its rhythms, cautiously probing its void-like nature with his own energy. It was like trying to shake hands with a black hole. Progress was infinitesimal, and every attempt left him feeling drained and chilled to the bone. His two self-appointed guardians were a study in contrasts. Ulti's method of helping involved bringing him massive plates of food, challenging him to thumb wars to keep his spirits up, and aggressively chasing away any pirate who lingered near his quarters for too long. Her concern was a loud, clumsy, but fiercely genuine thing. Black Maria's approach was more subtle. She would bring him rare teas said to aid in focus, sit with him in companionable silence for hours, and use her vast information network to gather any whispers or strange rumors from across Wano that might relate to his otherworldly pursuers. It was one such whisper that provided their first real lead. "A new faith is spreading in the flower capital," Maria said one evening, her voice a low murmur as she sat opposite him. The scent of jasmine from her tea filled the room. "They call themselves the children of silence. They preach of a coming peace, a great quiet that will end the suffering of this world." Naruto's eyes snapped open. "Silence," he repeated, the word tasting like ash. "My sources say it started small," Maria continued, her expression serious. "Disillusioned citizens, samurai who lost their masters, people who have given up hope of liberation. They meet in secret, drawn to a promise of an end to all pain. They worship a star." Ulti, who had been impatiently drumming her fingers on the floor, snorted. "A bunch of losers who want to die. So what? Let m. It's more than that," Naruto said, his gaze distant. The vision of his silenced village flashed in his mind. The silent star doesn't just destroy. It seduces. It offers the ultimate escape. If it's building a following here, it's not just a hunting party anymore. It's an invasion. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't wait for the next attack. He had to take the fight to them, to cut out the infection before it could spread. "I'm going to the capital," he announced. "Alone?" "Not a chance, idiot." Ulti immediately shot back, jumping to her feet. "You're a walking target. And you can't even go 5 minutes without someone wanting to either fight you or kiss you. You stick out like a sore thumb." "She has a point," Maria added smoothly, though she shot a glare at Ulti for the kiss comment. "You are now one of the most recognizable faces in Wano. You cannot simply walk into the capital." "Then I won't walk in as me," Naruto said, a flicker of his old, mischievous grin appearing for the first time in weeks. "I'll need a disguise. And I'll need backup who can blend in." He looked pointedly at the two of them. "You two are the least likely people to be seen traveling together. It's the perfect cover." The plan was audacious. All-Star Naruto the Golden Fox, and two of the notorious Tobi Rappo, infiltrating the capital city under the noses of the Shogun's forces and their own crew. It was dangerous, reckless, and their only real option. The flower capital was a vibrant, jarring sensory overload after the grim functionality of Onigashima. Brightly colored banners hung from elegant, curved roofs. The streets were a bustling river of people in beautiful kimonos, the air filled with the sounds of merchants hawking their wares, the laughter of children, and the distant music of festival drums. But beneath the veneer of prosperity, Naruto's sage mode felt the gnawing rot. He could sense the fear behind the painted smiles, the hunger in the bellies of the people who hurried past the food stalls, their eyes averted. This was Kaido's paradise, a beautiful cage built on a foundation of misery. Their disguises were surprisingly effective. Naruto had used a low-level transformation jutsu, not to change his face entirely, but to alter its features just enough to be unrecognizable. His hair was dyed a nondescript brown, his whisker marks were hidden, and he wore the simple, drab kimono of a traveling merchant. He had an unassuming air about him, just another face in the crowd. Ulti and Maria had foregone such mystical methods. Maria, a master of disguise and deception, had used makeup, posture, and a completely different style of kimono to transform herself from a towering seductress into a wealthy, matronly merchant's wife, her height still imposing but her aura completely changed. Ulti's disguise was the most shocking. She had traded her revealing, aggressive attire for a modest, dark blue kimono. Her two-toned hair was pinned up and hidden beneath a wide-brimmed straw hat, and her horns were concealed by clever angles and a scarf. Most startlingly, she had managed to suppress her usual aggressive posture, hunching slightly, her eyes downcast. She looked like a shy, nervous servant girl, a role she clearly despised. "I hate this," she muttered for the 20th time, her voice a low hiss as they walked through the crowded market. "I feel naked without my mask." "It's called subtlety, Ulti-chan," Maria whispered back, fanning herself like the noblewoman she was pretending to be. "A concept with which you are tragically unacquainted." "Shut up, you, both of you, quiet," Naruto chided gently, not breaking his stride. "We're a family of traveling cloth merchants. Try to act like it." He could feel their bickering create ripples in the crowd's attention, and they needed to remain invisible. Maria's network had given them a location, a high-end tea house in the city's main district, a place called the Gilded Leaf. It was a known gathering spot for influential nobles and merchants, and recently, it had become the favored haunt of a charismatic and increasingly popular nobleman named Urakami. He was the one her spies suspected was the core of the new cult. The Gilded Leaf was an oasis of calm. Polished wooden floors, intricate shoji screens, and the gentle sound of a koto being played by a geisha in the corner. They were led to a private table by a bowing hostess. From their vantage point, they could see most of the main floor. It didn't take long to spot their target. Urakami was holding court in the center of the room, surrounded by a rapt audience of well-dressed men and women. He was handsome, impeccably dressed, and spoke with a smooth, reassuring cadence. He talked of the hardships of life under the shogun Orochi and the tyrant Kaido, of the futility of struggle. "But there is another path," he was saying, his voice just loud enough for them to hear. "A path to peace. Not through violence, not through rebellion, but through acceptance. A great quiet is coming, a silence that will wash away all pain, all fear, all want. It will make us all equal. It will make us all serene." Naruto's eyes narrowed. Urakami's words were honeyed, but beneath them, his sage mode detected the same cold, void-like energy as the agent's. It was faint, masterfully concealed, but it was there. This man wasn't just a follower. He was a host. A more advanced one than the foot soldiers, one that could blend in, manipulate, and persuade. "That's him," Naruto murmured. "He's one of them." "He looks so normal," Ulti said, her hand instinctively inching toward the club she had hidden in the bundle of cloth they were carrying. "The most dangerous monsters always do," Maria replied, her eyes cold and analytical. As they watched, they saw Urakami's followers discreetly passing small, folded papers to other patrons. One of the hostesses approached their table, bowed, and offered them a similar paper. Naruto took it. It was an invitation to a private sermon in the teahouse's banquet room later that evening. The trap was being laid. And they were going to walk right into it. When they returned to the teahouse that evening, the atmosphere had changed. The casual patrons were gone. The shoji screens were closed, and the only people present were the dozen or so individuals from earlier, the ones who had listened so intently to Urakami. They had the placid, unervingly calm expressions of true believers. Urakami stood at the front of the banquet room, smiling warmly. "Welcome, friends. Welcome to the first day of your new, quiet lives." The moment the doors slid shut behind them, Naruto felt the trap spring. The faint, cold energy he had sensed earlier flared, coalescing and intensifying. The air grew heavy, and a psychic pressure descended on the room. The exits were sealed, not by locks, but by a barrier of pure, invisible force. You are not cloth merchants, Urakami said, his charming smile dropping away, replaced by a cold, alien emptiness. His eyes began to glow with the same dead, white light as the agent's. The anomaly. I felt your discordant energy the moment you entered the capital. Did you truly think you could hide from the gaze of the star? The other cultists' eyes began to glow in unison. They were all hosts, puppets in waiting. And you brought, company. Urakami's gaze fell on Ulti and Maria. He sneered. Beasts. Loud, chaotic, pointless creatures. You will all be silenced together. He raised a hand, and a wave of pure void energy, black and shimmering, shot toward them. Now! Naruto yelled. Their plan, rehearsed a dozen times, snapped into action. Maria moved first. With a flick of her wrists, she unleashed a torrent of nearly invisible, sticky spiderwebs from her sleeves. It wasn't aimed at Urakami, but at the other cultists, gumming up their movements, pinning them to the walls and floor before they could attack. It was a masterclass in crowd control. Simultaneously, Ulti let out a roar of frustration and relief, her disguise falling away. She launched herself forward, not at Urakami, but at the wall to his left, her head lowered. Ultimortar, she bellowed. Her headbutt, empowered by her ancient Zoan fruit, didn't just break the wall, it pulverized it, creating a massive escape route out into the teahouse's rear garden. Naruto met Urakami's attack head-on. He formed a Rasengan, infusing it with just enough sage energy to counter the void blast. The two attacks met in the middle of the room with a silent, violent implosion of energy that shattered every cup and table in the vicinity. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Naruto barked, and a dozen copies of him erupted into existence. They immediately engaged the webbed cultists, using precise, non-lethal taijutsu to knock them unconscious. The goal was to neutralize, not slaughter. The entire sequence took less than 5 seconds. It was a beautiful, chaotic symphony of strategic violence. To the garden. Naruto yelled to the real Ulti and Maria. They burst through the hole in the wall, finding themselves in a rock garden under the moonlight. Urakami floated through after them, his clothes and hair undisturbed by the chaos, his eyes burning with cold fire. Impressive, the entity wearing Urakami's skin said, its voice a discordant chorus. Such, noisy cooperation. It changes nothing. He raised both hands. The ground began to tremble. The void energy radiating from him intensified, and Naruto felt a familiar, sickening sensation. The devil fruit powers of his companions began to flicker. I can't hold my form. Ulti grunted, the scales on her skin receding. Maria clutched her arm, her web-producing glands sputtering. My webs, they're dissolving. The nullifying aura was stronger now, more focused. Urakami was a far more powerful conduit than the grunts they had faced before. He's the source, Naruto realized. Take him out, and the effect should stop. But Urakami was prepared. He gestured, and the unconscious bodies of the cultists from inside were dragged out by invisible forces, forming a living shield around him. These people came to me seeking peace, he said with Urakami's voice, a cruel mockery in his tone. They have given themselves to the great quiet. Would you strike them down to get to me? Would you deny them their salvation, hero? It was a moral checkmate. Naruto couldn't attack without harming the innocent hostages. Ulti snarled. The hell with them. They're traitors. Just blast through them. We can't, Maria said, her face grim. That's what he wants. Naruto looked at the blank faces of the cultists, then at Urakami's mocking smile. He felt a surge of cold fury. This creature was using his own principles against him. You're right, Naruto said to Urakami. I won't harm them. He took a step forward, his hands empty. You want me? You're hunting me. Let them go. This is between you and me. An honorable, but foolish, offer, Urakami sneered. Your life is the prize. Theirs are the shields. A simple equation. Then we'll have to change the math, Naruto said, his eyes glinting. He made a single, complex hand sign. It wasn't for a combat jutsu. It was for something far more subtle. A dozen Naruto clones, hidden amongst the shadows of the garden, suddenly leaped into action. They didn't attack. They ran past Urakami, placing small, paper tags on each of the unconscious cultists. The tags, inscribed with a variant of his father's flying Raijin formula, glowed for a bare second. Urakami laughed. Useless tricks. Paper will not stop me. It's not meant to stop you, Naruto said, a grim smile on his face. He formed a Rasengan in his hand. It's to get them out of the way. He vanished. In a flash of golden light, he teleported to the tag on the furthest hostage. He grabbed the hostage, and in the same instant, teleported again, this time to a tag placed on a tree outside the garden, depositing the hostage safely before flashing back to another hostage. He became a bolt of golden lightning, a living embodiment of the flying Raijin technique. Flash. Grab. Flash. Deposit. Flash. Return. He moved with such incredible speed that Urakami couldn't even track his movements. In the space of 3 seconds, he had moved every single hostage out of the combat zone, leaving Urakami standing alone in the middle of the garden. The entity's mocking expression was replaced by one of pure shock. It had no context for spatial-temporal ninjutsu. My turn, Naruto said, appearing directly in front of the stunned Urakami, the Rasengan still churning in his hand. He slammed it into the nobleman's chest. But as it connected, Urakami's body dissolved into a black, viscous liquid, the Rasengan passing through harmlessly. The liquid reformed behind Naruto. You cannot destroy me with mere physical force, anomaly, the entity hissed. I am not truly here. It lunged, its hand morphing into a sharp, black spike aimed at Naruto's back. Naruto couldn't turn in time. But he didn't need to. A massive, bone-white club, swung with furious force, intercepted the attack. Ulti, her powers partially returned now that she was further from Urakami, had charged in, her face a mask of primal fury. The club connected with the black spike, and a shockwave of her hockey-infused blow blasted the liquid form apart. At the same time, a thick, sticky web shot from the side, enveloping the scattering black droplets, holding them together. Don't let it reform. Maria shouted, her own powers returning. They had seen his plan and adapted instantly. Naruto seized the opportunity. He knew he couldn't destroy the entity's projection with a normal Rasengan. But he could attack the host. He flashed through a series of hand signs, gathering sage energy. Sage art, frog call. It was a jutsu he rarely used, a powerful genjutsu delivered through sound. A deep, croaking resonance filled the air, a sound that bypassed the ears and vibrated directly in the mind. It was designed to disorient and paralyze. The liquid entity, held by Maria's webs, recoiled. The sound disrupted the connection between it and its host. For a split second, the image of Urakami flickered, his face contorted in pain. The link was severed. The black liquid evaporated into nothingness, its connection to this plane broken. Urakami's body fell to the ground, unconscious but alive, the white glow gone from his eyes. Silence descended on the garden. They had won. Not through brute force, but through strategy, teamwork, and a complete refusal to compromise Naruto's principles. Breathing heavily, Naruto looked at his companions. Ulti was leaning on her club, grinning ferociously. Maria was calmly reeling in her webs, a look of deep satisfaction on her face. They had functioned as a perfect unit. Suddenly, Naruto staggered, clutching his right arm. The brand was pulsing with a furious, cold light. During the fight, as he used his own chakra and sage energy, the brand had been feeding, growing stronger on the overflow. Now, it unleashed a backlash of pure void energy directly into his system. A wave of intense, searing cold shot through him. He saw Ulti and Maria rush toward him, their faces etched with alarm. He saw them reaching for him. He saw them willing to die for him. And in that moment of agony, something inside him shifted. His feelings for these two infuriating, dangerous, and loyal women, feelings he had been pushing aside and refusing to analyze, crystallized into a sharp, undeniable truth. It wasn't just camaraderie. It wasn't just gratitude. It was deeper. More complex. His vision tunneled. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Ulti's terrified face and Maria's outstretched hand. He had protected them. But in doing so, he had fed the enemy within. Later, in the cramped but private room of the inn they had secured, Naruto drifted back to consciousness. He was lying on a futon, his head resting on something soft. He cracked his eyes open to find his head was in Ulti's lap. She was clumsily dabbing his forehead with a cool cloth, her usual scowl replaced by an expression of raw, undisguised worry. On his other side, Maria was holding his hand, her thumb gently tracing patterns on his skin. The brand on his arm was quiet now, sated. The room was silent, save for the sound of their breathing. The rivalry, the tension, it was all gone, burned away by the heat of battle and the shared fear of losing him. "You're awake," Maria whispered, relief washing over her features. "You damn idiot," Ulti mumbled, trying and failing to sound angry. "You scared the hell out of us." Naruto looked from one to the other. He saw the genuine fear they had felt for him. He saw the fierce protectiveness in their eyes. And he saw the unspoken question that now hung between the three of them. He knew he had to address it. Lying to himself, or to them, was no longer an option. "Ulti," he said, his voice raspy. She stopped dabbing his forehead. "Maria." She squeezed his hand. He started, then stopped. How could he even begin to explain the mess of emotions in his heart? How could he explain that the fierce, protective loyalty of one and the sharp, understanding empathy of the other had both found a home in his lonely soul? He didn't need to. They saw it in his eyes. Ulti's face flushed a deep red. She looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "Just, don't do that again, you hear me? Don't be so reckless." It was her version of a confession. Maria simply brought his hand to her lips and pressed a soft kiss to his knuckles. "We are here, Naruto," she said softly. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a neat and tidy declaration. It was an acceptance. An acknowledgement of the strange, powerful, and deeply unconventional bond that had formed between the three of them in the fires of Onigashima. They were a paradox, a hero and two villains, a fox, a spider, and a dinosaur. And somehow, in this world of beasts and demons, they had become each other's sanctuary. Chapter 7, The Calamity's Gambit. News of the incident at the flower capital traveled faster than a wildfire. A teahouse partially destroyed, a prominent nobleman driven mad, and dozens of his followers found unconscious, all without a single witness to the perpetrators. To the citizens, it was another inexplicable event in their turbulent world. But to the inner circle of the beast pirates, the truth was far more unsettling. Naruto, Ulti, and Black Maria returned to Onigashima not to a hero's welcome, but to an atmosphere of simmering tension. They had succeeded, but their unauthorized, clandestine mission was a blatant subversion of the crew's hierarchy. They had acted alone, a self-contained unit outside the established chain of command. And to two of the three calamities, this was the final, unforgivable transgression. The throne room was cold. King and Queen stood before Kaido's empty throne, awaiting Naruto. When he entered, flanked by Ulti and Maria, the temperature seemed to drop even further. "You left the island without permission," King's voice was flat, but held the sharp edge of a drawn blade. "You engaged an unknown enemy in the capital, risking exposure for the entire crew. You acted as your own authority. There was a threat, and I neutralized it, Naruto countered, his tone equally firm. The silent star was creating a foothold. I cut it out. You cut it out with two of our most valuable assets, endangering them on your personal vendetta. Queen boomed, his massive body quivering with indignation. This was his true grievance. Naruto wasn't just acting independently, he was poaching Queen's own rivals from the Tobirappo, building his own power base. Ulti and Maria are members of this crew. They answer to Kaido-sama, not to you. They volunteered, Naruto stated simply. Because you've bewitched them. Queen spat, jabbing a thick, metallic finger at him. With your fancy light shows and your sad, lonely boy act. You are a cancer in this crew, disrupting the order, turning our own people against us. My loyalty is to Kaido-sama, Ulti snarled, stepping forward, her hand on her club. And Naruto is Kaido-sama's all-star. He acted to protect this crew from those creepy silent freaks. This has gone far enough, King said, his voice cutting through the argument. He turned his masked face toward Naruto, and for the first time, Naruto felt a wave of pure, unadulterated killing intent from the man. You are a disruption, Naruto Uzumaki. You do not follow our ways. You do not respect our structure. You are a foreign element, and you must be purged. The threat was naked, unambiguous. It was a declaration of internal war. But before Naruto could respond, a deep, rumbling laughter echoed from the rafters. Kaido dropped from the balcony, landing with a ground-shaking thud. He was holding a massive leg of roasted beast, and he looked thoroughly amused. Purged? Kaido chuckled, taking a huge bite of meat. King, you sound like one of those stiff-backed Marines. The boy saw a threat and he eliminated it. He took initiative. He showed strength. That is the only law that matters on this island. He pointed the half-eaten bone at Naruto. Your methods were unconventional. But the result is all that matters. The children of silence are gone. Good work. The casual dismissal of their grievances was a slap in the face to King and Queen. Kaido didn't care about protocol or hierarchy. He cared only about strength and results. And Naruto had delivered both. As Naruto, Ulti, and Maria left the throne room, the glare from the two calamities was hot enough to melt steel. Naruto had won the battle, but he had solidified his status as their number one enemy. Kaido's favor was a shield, but it was also a target on his back. They would not challenge him openly again. The next attack would be from the shadows. The plan was devised in the bowels of Queen's laboratories, a place of noxious fumes, whirring machinery, and cruel science. It was a simple, brutal, and elegant piece of treachery. He's too strong to take head-on, Queen said, pacing furiously around a bubbling vat of green liquid. And Kaido-san has his back. So, we can't be the ones to kill him. King stood perfectly still by the door, a silent, menacing shadow. An external force, he stated. Exactly. Queen exclaimed, a sadistic grin spreading across his face. There are plenty of fools in the new world who hold a grudge against Kaido-san. Old rivals, upstarts who want to make a name for themselves. He cackled. We'll just give one of them a little encouragement. An anonymous tip. The location of a high-value target, isolated and vulnerable. He is never isolated, King countered. The women are always with him. Even better. Queen's grin widened. We leaked that the new All-Star and two of the Tobirappo are inspecting a minor territory. A soft target. We let our enemies do the dirty work. If they succeed, our problem is solved. If they fail, they've still bloodied him, weakened him, and reminded him that the world outside Onigashima is not his playground. It is a perfect, no-loss scenario for us. King was silent for a long moment, processing the cold logic of the plan. It was dishonorable. It was treacherous. But it was also undeniably effective. Their rival was too powerful, his influence growing too fast. The stability of their positions, of the crew they had helped build for decades, was at stake. "There is a fleet," King said finally, his voice a low rasp. "Splinter crew from the Old Rocks pirates. They call themselves the Crimson Lions. Their captain, Bloodmane Byaku, has a particular hatred for Kaido. He believes Kaido betrayed them at God Valley." "Perfect." Queen cackled. "They're strong, they're numerous, and they're stupidly proud. They'll jump at the chance to take a piece out of Kaido-san's new favorite. I'll have one of my crows leak the intel." The trap was set. The bait was chosen. Now, they just had to send the lambs to the slaughter. The mission was presented as a triviality. A small island at the eastern edge of their territory, Isola Nivola, had been late with its tribute payment. Kaido, at the subtle suggestion of Queen, had ordered Naruto to go and remind them of their obligations. To add insult to injury, he was to take Ulti and Maria with him. It was framed as a milk run, a task beneath a calamity but perfect for the new All-Star to handle some administrative duties. Naruto knew it was a trap. His sage mode, constantly active at a low level, had felt the shift in King and Queen's demeanor. He felt the cold, conspiratorial energy between them. This mission, coming so soon after their confrontation, was too convenient. "It's a setup," he said to Ulti and Maria in the privacy of his quarters as they prepared to depart. "Of course it is," Ulti scoffed, checking the grip on her kanabo. "Those two are as subtle as a kick to the teeth. You think we should tell Kaido-sama?" "No," Naruto said, his eyes narrowed in thought. "If we do, they'll deny it. We have no proof. It becomes our word against two of his oldest commanders. We'll look like we're trying to avoid a simple mission. So we walk into it?" Maria asked, a silken shawl draped over her shoulders, her expression grim. "That seems unwise." "We don't walk into it," Naruto said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "We spring it. They want to test me. They want to see what I do when I'm cornered. Fine. Let's give them a show they will never forget." He wasn't angry. He was something far colder. He was a veteran of 100 impossible missions, a shinobi who had been betrayed, hunted, and underestimated his entire life. King and Queen thought they were setting a trap for a pirate. They had no idea they were trying to cage a Kage. They arrived at Isola Nivola on a small, fast ship, just the three of them. The island was a quiet, peaceful place, a series of rocky mesas shrouded in a perpetual, low-hanging mist, giving it its name, the Cloud Island. The tribute was waiting for them at the docks, the town's mayor practically shaking with fear. The mission itself was over in minutes. But as they loaded the tribute, Naruto's sensory abilities flared. "They're here." Out of the mist, they came. A fleet. Dozens of ships, their sails a blood red, emblazoned with the sigil of a snarling lion. They swarmed out of the fog banks, surrounding the small island, their cannons already turning to aim at the docks. At the prow of the lead ship, a massive galleon, stood a man with a wild mane of red hair and a captain's coat draped over his bare, scarred chest. Bloodmane Byaku. Well, his voice boomed across the water, amplified by a subordinate with a den mushi. "Look what we have here. Kaido's new pet and a couple of his favorite whores, caught with their pants down. This is for God Valley, you bastards." Ulti's knuckles went white. "Whores. I'm going to tear his stupid red mane out and strangle him with it." "Patience," Naruto said, his voice unnervingly calm. He looked at the fleet. At least 30 ships. Thousands of men. A Yonko-level ambush. "So, what's the plan, hotshot?" Ulti asked, a manic grin on her face. "You gonna blow up the ocean?" "Something like that," Naruto said. He closed his eyes, drawing in a massive amount of natural energy. The air around him crackled. The brand on his arm pulsed, feeding on the influx, but he ignored the cold drain. He needed all the power he could get. "Maria," he said, his eyes still closed. "Can you get us some height?" "With pleasure," she replied. She unleashed a thick, strong stream of spider silk, creating a tether to the top of the highest mesa on the island. "Hold on." She grabbed both him and Ulti, and with a powerful tug, launched them into the air, reeling them in toward the peak. They landed on the flat top of the mesa, high above the docks, with a commanding view of the entire enemy fleet. "Fire!" Byaku roared from below. A deafening barrage of cannon fire erupted. Hundreds of cannonballs screamed toward their perch. "My turn!" Ulti yelled. She transformed into her full Pachycephalosaurus form, a hulking dinosaur of immense power. She planted her feet and lowered her head. "Stay behind me." The cannonballs slammed into her domed, armored skull. Each impact was like a thunderclap, but she stood her ground, a living shield of prehistoric bone and sheer stubbornness, taking the full force of the volley without giving an inch. Behind her, Naruto opened his eyes. They were no longer just blue. They were glowing, molten gold, the pupils slitted like a fox's. He was in his full six-path sage mode. A cloak of brilliant, fiery chakra erupted around him, and behind him, 9 black truth-seeking orbs manifested, hovering in a halo. The sheer, overwhelming pressure of his power washed over the island. The sea itself seemed to still. On the ships below, the pirates stopped firing, their jaws slack. The energy radiating from the figure on the mesa was beyond anything they had ever felt. It was a power on the level of an emperor of the sea. What is that?" Byaku stammered, his bravado evaporating. Naruto floated into the air, the golden cloak of chakra flowing around him. Behind him, the chakra began to coalesce, to take shape. It grew and grew, a colossal form of golden, translucent energy, a titanic avatar of a 9-tailed fox, easily dwarfing the largest ship in the fleet. The Kurama avatar threw back its head and let out a roar that was not a sound, but a shockwave of pure, untamed power that cracked the very sky. Ulti, in her dinosaur form, stared up at the golden titan, her mind unable to process the scale of it. Maria looked on, her heart pounding in her chest, a mixture of terror and exhilaration washing over her. This was his true power. This was what he had been holding back. Naruto, floating within the head of the Kurama avatar, looked down upon the fleet with cold, imperial disdain. He raised a hand. One of the truth-seeking orbs floated into his palm and expanded, morphing into a long, black staff. "You wanted a show," Naruto's voice boomed, amplified by the avatar, a god speaking from on high. "So be it." He pointed the staff at the ship on the far left of the enemy formation. A thin beam of black energy, no thicker than a spear, shot from its tip. It struck the ship's main mast. The ship didn't explode. It didn't catch fire. The point where the beam struck, and everything connected to it, simply ceased to exist. The mast, the deck, the hull, they were erased, turning to dust. The rest of the ship, its structural integrity gone, collapsed in on itself and sank beneath the waves in seconds. Silence. The thousands of pirates on the fleet stared in horror at the empty space where their comrade's ship had been. "Now for the rest of you," Naruto's voice echoed, devoid of mercy. He raised the avatar's giant, golden hand. A swirling sphere of negative and positive chakra, a tailed beast bomb, formed in its palm, growing rapidly to the size of a small island. But Naruto wasn't finished. He infused it with his wind-style chakra. A massive, swirling blade of wind, a raisin shuriken, formed around the tailed beast bomb, its scream tearing at the fabric of reality. Tailed beast bomb raisin shuriken. A technique capable of leveling a mountain range. He threw it. It didn't fly straight. It flew in a wide arc, like a giant, deadly boomerang. It scythed through the right flank of the enemy fleet. 10 ships were in its path. They didn't stand a chance. The Raisin Shuriken's wind blade sliced them in half, while the core energy of the tailed beast bomb vaporized them into nothingness. The attack carved a massive, empty crescent in the ocean, the water boiling and hissing where the ships had been. The attack then curved back, scything through the left flank, erasing another 10 ships in a wave of apocalyptic destruction. In less than a minute, 2/3 of the Crimson Lion's fleet had been annihilated. The remaining ships, including Byaku's flagship, were in chaos, pirates diving into the sea, their morale utterly shattered. Byaku stood frozen on his deck, his face pale, his mind broken. He had come to hunt a lion and had found a god. The Kurama avatar slowly turned its massive head, its glowing red eyes fixing on the flagship. This was enough. The message had been sent. But Naruto wasn't finished. This wasn't just about survival. This was about sending a message back to Onigashima. He used his advanced sensory abilities, amplified 1,000-fold by his six-path sage mode. He reached out, not with his eyes, but with his senses, tracing the chain of information. He felt the lingering energy of the crow that had delivered the message to the Crimson Lions. He followed that faint trail back across the sea, back to Onigashima, back to the laboratories of Queen the Plague. He saw the smirking face of the Calamity, saw the silent, approving nod of the Masked King. He had his proof. He let the Kurama avatar dissipate, the golden light fading, leaving him floating in the air alone, the truth-seeking orbs still orbiting him like dark stars. He descended gracefully, landing on the deck of Byaku's flagship. The terrified crew scrambled away from him as if he were the plague itself. Byaku fell to his knees. "Mercy," he begged, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Please, mercy." Naruto looked down at him, his golden eyes cold. "You will deliver a message for me," he commanded. "You will tell everyone in the New World what you saw here today. You will tell them that the golden fox of the beast pirates is not to be trifled with." He paused, then leaned in closer. "And then, you will take what's left of your fleet, and you will disappear. If I ever see your flag again, I will not leave a single splinter." He turned and leaped from the ship, landing back on the mesa where Ulti and Maria were waiting. Ulti had reverted to her human form, and she and Maria were staring at him with expressions of pure, unadulterated shock and awe. "So," Ulti finally managed to say, her voice barely a squeak. "That's what you can do." Naruto's golden chakra cloak faded, his eyes returning to their normal blue. He looked exhausted, the use of such immense power, combined with the brand's drain, having taken its toll. "Let's go home," he said wearily. "I have a message of my own to deliver." When they returned to Onigashima, he didn't request an audience. He walked directly to Queen's laboratories, Ulti and Maria at his heels. They kicked the door in. King and Queen were there, waiting for a report on Naruto's demise. The looks on their faces when he walked in, alive, powerful, and radiating cold fury, were a picture of abject shock. Naruto didn't shout. He didn't make a scene. He walked to the center of the room, his footsteps echoing in the sudden, tense silence. "The Crimson Lions have been retired," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. 30 ships. A few thousand men. Gone. Queen stammered, his mind unable to reconcile the report he was expecting with the reality standing before him. What? How? "I dealt with them," Naruto said. He then looked directly at Queen, his eyes boring into the calamities. "I traced the information leak. It came from one of your crows. A direct order from you, authorized by King." He laid the proof out, not with physical evidence, but with the unshakable certainty of a man who had seen it with his own eyes. The details he provided, the time, the place, the specific crow used, were too precise to be a guess. Queen turned pale. King's body went rigid. They were caught. They expected him to run to Kaido. They expected him to cry foul. He did neither. "This is the last time," Naruto said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. He took a step forward, and the sheer pressure of his presence made the two towering calamities flinch. "This crew has a real enemy. A god of silence that wants to erase this entire world. The world government is gathering its forces, and they will see our internal chaos as an opportunity. We are facing threats from beyond the stars and from across the sea." He looked from Queen's terrified face to King's unreadable mask. "You can continue to see me as your rival, and I promise you, that is a war you will lose. Or, you can see me as your ally, and we can unite the full strength of the beast pirates to face the coming storm. The games are over. The internal power struggles end now. Either we stand together, or I will remove you from the board. Choose." It was not a threat. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the absolute confidence of a man who had just annihilated a fleet by himself. He had the power to make good on his promise. He had the authority from Kaido. And now, he had the moral high ground. He had them cornered, not with violence, but with irrefutable logic and overwhelming power. He turned and walked out of the laboratory, leaving the two most powerful men in the beast pirates under Kaido standing in stunned, horrified silence. The upstart hadn't just survived their ultimate gambit. He had turned it back on them, ended their rivalry, and asserted his position not just as an all-star, but as a true leader of the crew. The internal war was over. And he had won. Chapter 8, Echoes of the Void. The treaty, or rather, the armed truce, between Naruto and the calamities held. King and Queen, checkmated and thoroughly humbled, ceased their overt hostilities. A new, grudging respect replaced their enmity, born from the terrifying display of power Naruto had unleashed. They had tried to eliminate a rival and had instead solidified his position as a core pillar of the crew. The internal fractures of the beast pirates were not so much mended as they were cauterized by the sheer heat of Naruto's power. Onigashima became a hive of focused activity, the pirates' energy now directed outward, preparing for the two great threats Naruto had named, the world government and the Silent Star. But the universe does not wait for pirates to prepare. It began on a clear, moonless night. A night so still and quiet that even the ceaseless party in the main hall seemed muted. The first sign was not a sound, but the absence of it. The chirping of the island's insects faded. The crash of the waves against the cliffs softened, then stopped altogether. A profound, unnatural silence began to fall over Onigashima, a blanket of quiet that smothered all noise. Then, the sky broke. Directly above the island, the stars vanished. Not obscured by clouds, but simply gone. In their place, a perfect circle of absolute blackness appeared, a hole in the fabric of the night. It was not a shadow, it was an anti-light, a patch of sky that felt like it was looking back. The sphere of nothingness began to grow, expanding slowly, inexorably. As it did, the effect on the island intensified. Color began to fade from the world below. The vibrant reds of the fortress's torii gates leached into a dull gray. The rich greens of the sparse vegetation turned ashen. The world was being desaturated, its life and vibrancy being drawn up into the silent void above. Every living thing on the island felt it. A deep, psychic dread that settled in the pit of the stomach. A feeling of being watched by something cold, vast, and utterly indifferent to their existence. On the battlements, pirates stumbled out of their halls, their drunken revelry forgotten. They looked up at the sky, their faces pale with a primal fear. "What is that?" someone whispered, but their voice was thin, robbed of its resonance. The most terrifying effect, however, was on the devil fruit users. Queen, who had been in his lab, suddenly felt a wave of nausea. The complex machinery integrated into his body sputtered and died. The cybernetic enhancements that made him a calamity went dark. He was just a fat, helpless man in a metal suit. Ulti and Page 1, who were together in their quarters, felt a crippling weakness. Their Zoan forms, which they could access as easily as breathing, were suddenly beyond their reach. The link to their prehistoric power was severed. From her estate, Black Maria felt her connection to her spider-like abilities vanish. The webs that adorned her room, once a part of her, became inert, common threads. Across the island, every gifter, every headliner, every pirate who relied on the power of a devil fruit was reduced to their base human form, their greatest weapon stolen from them by the silent, growing sphere in the sky. Only two beings on the island seemed unaffected. Kaido, standing on the peak of the skull dome, threw back his head and laughed, a sound that was immediately swallowed by the oppressive silence. The nullifying aura did not affect his raw, physical might, his god-tier haki, or the innate toughness of his unique lineage. He was a force of nature, and this was a challenge. "So, you've finally shown yourself, you silent bastard," he roared at the sky. He transformed, not through a devil fruit, but through his own mysterious power. His body elongated, scales the color of azure erupting from his skin. He became a colossal eastern dragon, a divine beast of myth, and launched himself into the sky, a streak of blue against the encroaching gray. He flew toward the black sphere and unleashed a blast breath, a torrent of pure, destructive energy. The fiery beam slammed into the edge of the void and simply vanished. It did not explode. It did not rebound. It was unmade, its energy siphoned away into the nothingness. Kaido roared in frustration and charged, his body wreathed in conqueror's haki. He slammed his massive form into the sphere. It was like hitting smoke. His body passed through the edge, into the sphere itself. For a moment, his vibrant blue scales turned a sick, monochrome gray. He felt a horrifying draining sensation, a power that wasn't just negating his abilities, but was trying to unwrite his very existence. He recoiled, pulling back with a snarl of fury and, for the first time in decades, a flicker of genuine concern. His attacks were useless. Down below, the second unaffected being felt a different sensation. Naruto stood on his meditation ledge, his eyes wide as he stared at the sky. The brand on his arm was no longer cold. It was burning. A searing, white-hot fire that consumed his entire forearm. It was not a drain, it was a call. A summons. The brand was a key, and the sphere in the sky was the lock. It was pulling him, a psychic tether that grew stronger with every passing second. He knew with an absolute, chilling certainty that the sphere was a gateway, a localized rift into the silent star's own dimension. And he was the only one who could enter. Ulti and Maria found him there, their faces pale and drawn. They were stripped of their devil fruits, but not of their courage. They ran to his side, their expressions a mixture of fear for the world and terror for him. "Naruto, what is this?" Maria asked, her voice thin and strained. "It's here," he said, his gaze locked on the void. "The main body. Or at least, a part of it. It's not sending puppets anymore." He looked at them, at the two women who had become his anchors in this chaotic world. He saw their fear, but he also saw their unwavering resolve to stand by him. "I have to go up there," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Alone? Don't be an idiot." Ulti snapped, her voice lacking its usual force. She grabbed his unbranded arm. "We're not letting you go. We'll fight it together." "You can't," he said gently, his heart aching. "Your powers are gone. My sage mode is the only thing that can hurt it. This is my fight. It has always been my fight." He looked at the growing sphere. The world below was now almost completely gray. The life force of the entire island was being siphoned away, and soon the drain would become permanent. The beast pirates, stripped of their powers, were just a terrified mob. Kaido, for all his power, was helpless against an enemy he couldn't hit. He was the only one. He turned to face them fully. He looked at Maria, at her fierce intelligence and the deep, quiet empathy he had found beneath her webs. He reached out and cupped her cheek. "Keep them safe," he whispered. He then turned to Ulti, to her furious, untamable spirit and the raw, honest loyalty that burned in her heart. He gently touched her forehead, right where their first, fateful headbutt had connected. Don't do anything too stupid while I'm gone. There were 1,000 things he wanted to say. 1,000 feelings he wanted to articulate. But there was no time. He poured all of his love, his fear, and his resolve into those simple touches, that final look. Ulti's eyes filled with tears. Promise me, she choked out, her voice breaking. Promise you'll come back. I promise, he said. He pulled away from them, his heart feeling like it was being torn in two. He took a deep breath, and a cloak of golden sage chakra erupted around him, a beacon of brilliant, vibrant color in the dying, gray world. I'll be back, he shouted over his shoulder, a promise to them, to himself, to the world. And then he launched himself into the sky, a golden comet aimed at the heart of the void. Passing through the edge of the sphere was like diving into ice water. The world of sound, color, and sensation vanished, replaced by an infinite, silent, monochrome abyss. He was floating in a non-space, a dimension of impossible geometry where up and down had no meaning. Strange, crystalline structures drifted past him like silent, dead asteroids. The air, if it could be called that, was thin and cold, and the silence was so profound it felt like a physical pressure against his eardrums. The brand on his arm was no longer burning. It was resonating, humming in tune with this dimension, pulling him toward a single point in the maddening emptiness. He flew through the abyss, his golden aura the only point of light and color in a universe of gray. And then he saw it. Floating in the center of the void was the entity's avatar. It was not the star-shaped hole he had fought before. This was a physical form, a being of pure, crystallized silence. It was vaguely humanoid, but its body was composed of a shimmering, black, crystalline substance that seemed to absorb the very concept of light. Its head was a smooth, featureless ovoid, and from its back sprouted jagged, wing-like shards of the same black crystal. It radiated an aura of perfect, eternal peace that was more terrifying than any display of rage. As Naruto approached, it spoke, its voice not a sound, but a direct, telepathic transmission that was as clear and cold as glacial ice. You have come, anomaly. I'm here to end this, Naruto projected back, his own thoughts a sharp contrast of warmth and emotion. End? No. This is a beginning. The beginning of peace. The avatar gestured with a long, crystalline hand to the swirling gray chaos around them. This world you champion is a symphony of screaming. Life is pain. Emotion is friction. Consciousness is a flaw. A constant, pointless, noisy struggle against the inevitable return to silence. Our struggle gives our lives meaning. Naruto countered, his truth-seeking orbs swirling around him defensively. The pain, the joy, the anger, the love, that's what it means to be alive. A flawed perspective, the avatar replied, its tone devoid of any emotion. You are a being of infinite life, a nexus of the very noise I seek to correct. You are the ultimate blasphemy. I offered your world the gift of peace. Its silence is beautiful. Now, I will give that gift to you. The avatar's crystalline wings flared. It moved, not with speed, but by seeming to erase the distance between them. It was simply there, its hand, sharpened to a razor point, aimed at Naruto's heart. Naruto reacted on pure instinct, blocking with his truth-seeking staff. The impact was silent, but the shockwave it produced was a violent distortion of the space around them. The avatar's strength was immense, its substance harder than any material Naruto had ever encountered. Their battle began. It was a fight unlike any other. A clash not of jutsu and techniques, but of fundamental principles. Life versus anti-existence. Sound versus silence. Naruto was a whirlwind of motion, his six-path sage mode pushing his physical abilities to their absolute limit. He attacked with Razengans infused with natural energy, with punches that could shatter mountains, with the absolute defense of his truth-seeking orbs. But the avatar was its own kind of perfect. It met his attacks not with brute force, but with a quiet, unyielding negation. His Razengans would fizzle out against its crystalline skin. His physical blows would land with a dull thud, the kinetic energy siphoned away. It was like fighting a shadow that could hit back. And every time the Avatar's crystalline claws scraped against his chakra cloak, he felt that draining, erasing sensation. It was a battle of attrition, and he was slowly, inevitably losing. "Your energy is finite," the Avatar stated, its assault relentless. "My silence is eternal. Surrender. Accept the peace." "Never." Naruto roared, his frustration mounting. He was a god of his world, and he was being dismantled piece by piece. He needed more power. But his power was life energy, and this place, this being, was its direct counter. He couldn't draw on the natural energy here, there was none. He was running on his own reserves, and the brand on his arm was still a slow, constant leak. The brand. An idea, born of sheer desperation, sparked in his mind. He had been trying to suppress the brand, to fight it. But what if he embraced it? It was a monstrous power, a sliver of the silent star's own void-like energy, latched onto his soul. What would happen if he stopped fighting it and instead merged it with his own power? The fusion of life and anti-life, of creation and erasure. It was madness. It could destroy him from the inside out. It was a gamble on the scale of a god. He made his choice. He disengaged from the Avatar, creating distance. He floated in the silent void, closed his eyes, and focused inward. He stopped resisting the brand's drain. He opened the floodgates. He didn't just let it take his chakra. He actively fed it, pouring his own life energy into the swirling black spiral on his arm. The pain was unimaginable. It felt like his soul was being torn in two. The cold, void energy of the brand and the warm, vibrant energy of his six-path sage mode collided within his chakra network. It was a war inside his own body. Black and gold energy erupted from him, warring for dominance, threatening to tear him apart. The Avatar paused its attack, its featureless head tilting as it observed the process. "You are attempting to metabolize poison. You will unmake yourself." Naruto gritted his teeth, his body convulsing. He focused on a single image, Ulti's tear-streaked face, Maria's hand in his. His promise. "I will come back." That promise became his anchor. He wouldn't just let the energies collide. He would force them to merge. He remembered his struggle with Kurama, turning the fox's raw hatred into a source of power. This was the same principle, but on a cosmic scale. He would not be a vessel for two warring powers. He would be the master of both. With a final, guttural roar that had no sound but shook his very being, he forced the union. The chaotic black and gold energy stabilized. It did not merge into a gray compromise. It became something new. A new chakra cloak erupted around him. It was no longer pure, fiery gold. It was a deep, obsidian black, shot through with veins of brilliant, pulsating gold. His hair remained blonde, but his 9 truth-seeking orbs, once a uniform black, now swirled with the same black and gold energy. His eyes, when he opened them, were terrifying. The sclera were black as pitch, and his irises glowed with the intensity of a dying star, a fusion of his sage-like cross pupils and the slitted eyes of the fox. He had merged the power of life and the void. He had taken the essence of his enemy and made it his own. This was no longer sage mode. This was something darker, more powerful, more absolute. This was Azura mode. The Avatar actually recoiled, a flicker of something that might have been surprise rippling across its psychic presence. Naruto looked at his own hands, at the terrifying new power coursing through him. He felt complete. The draining sensation was gone. The brand on his arm was no longer a wound, but a focal point, a perfectly integrated part of him. He looked at the Avatar. And for the first time, he smiled. A cold, dangerous smile. He vanished, moving with a speed that was no longer just physical, but seemed to bend space itself. He appeared behind the avatar, his hand outstretched. He didn't form a Rasengan. He formed a sphere of pure, swirling, black and gold energy, a perfect vortex of creation and destruction held in his palm. Impossible, the avatar projected, a hint of what sounded like fear in its voice. Nothing's impossible, Naruto said, his voice a low, resonant harmony of his own and a deeper, colder tone. He slammed his new attack into the avatar's back. This time, it didn't fizzle out. This time, it didn't thud uselessly. The sphere of paradoxical energy struck the crystalline being, and it began to fracture. The energy didn't just break it, it unwrote it. The life energy attacked its physical form, while the void energy attacked its conceptual existence. The avatar let out a silent, psychic scream of pure agony as cracks of golden light spread across its black, crystalline body. It was being destroyed on every level of its being. With a final, silent implosion, the avatar of the silent star shattered into a million motes of black and gold dust, which then faded into nothingness. Naruto floated in the silent void, panting, the new, terrifying power slowly receding. He had won. He had defeated the avatar. He could feel the dimension around him beginning to destabilize, the gateway collapsing. A rift of color and sound opened up above him, the path back to Wano. He flew toward it, his promise echoing in his heart. He had won the battle. But as he looked at his hand, at the lingering wisps of black and gold chakra, he knew the war was far from over. He had only defeated a projection. The silent star itself, a vast and patient entity, was still out there. And now, he had made himself not just an anomaly, but its equal and opposite. Chapter 9, The World Shakes. Opportunity knocks. The world government, detecting the Wano anomaly and the chaos among the beast pirates, sees an opportunity. They dispatch a buster call fleet led by Admiral Ryukujiu to annihilate the island and a Yonko crew in one fell swoop. An alliance of monsters, with their devil fruit powers nullified or weakened, the beast pirates face the marine fleet. In a shocking twist, King and Queen, now allied with Naruto's cause, lead the defense. Kaido roars in defiance and engages the Admiral directly in a titanic clash of haki and raw power. The stand of the She-Devils, Ulti and Maria, their faith in Naruto absolute, become cornerstones of the defense. They fight with a ferocity that rallies the demoralized pirates, demonstrating their own leadership and power as they protect their home, waiting for his return. The Golden Dawn, as the battle reaches its peak, a blinding explosion of golden light erupts from the black sphere, shattering it into nothingness. The life-draining effect vanishes. Naruto, battered but triumphant, falls from the sky. Victory, King catches Naruto in midair. The beast pirates, their powers returning, let out a unified roar of victory. The Marines, their primary objective gone and now facing a re-energized and furious Yonko crew, are forced into a humiliating retreat. The beast pirates have just defeated a god and a buster call on the same day. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.